Artem was one of the moons of Solterra. But within this moon live a race of humans that were referred to as moon people. Ironically, the other moon, which went by the name Chandria, also had moon people in it. But these two races didn't get along. Countless wars had been fought between them in the past, but after a great struggle, the people of Artem won, forcing the people of Chandria to go into hiding. But the royal family of Chandria didn't run and hide, which was part of the agreement they had with the royal family of Artem, so that their people would be spared. And a year after that war, a girl was born between the princess of the Chandria and the king of Artem. However, this child wasn't born out of love. No, she was born so that the king of Artem could absorb and refine her bloodline, allowing him to become a celestial. But Callie's mother didn't want that to happen. She wanted to save her baby, so she sent her to Solterra in secret. As a drastic measure to prevent her husband from knowing where the baby was, she erased her memory, so that no matter how much she was interrogated or tortured, she would not divulge where she had sent her daughter. Years passed, and the king of Artem still couldn't find the baby. He had tried many times to get his wife pregnant, but the princess of the moon was only allowed to give birth to one child. As long as that child was alive, she wouldn't be able to give birth again. The moon of Chandria had mystic powers, and whether it had a deity that also wished to save the child or not, it ensured that she was well hidden from the eyes of the king of Artem. However, during a lunar eclipse, when the deity's power was weak, the king of Artem conducted a ritual which would allow him to find his daughter's whereabouts. That was when he found out that she was on Solterra, particularly the Arcadia archipelago. After finding where his daughter was, he made preparations to send his people to Solterra on the next lunar eclipse so that they would retrieve his daughter. But to ensure that Callie wouldn't be able to escape him, he had sent two structures to the Arcadia archipelago to prevent his daughter from escaping. These were the two pyramids that would allow them to erect a gate which would allow them to teleport directly to the island. At first, they were only able to send a few of their people because they didn't know if the connection was stable enough. This was also why Callie, Uncle Boo, and Albion managed to repel and kill the first invaders that came to the island. But after using the first transfer as an experiment, they understood that they could modify the pyramids to allow them to transfer more of their people. Uncle Boo and Albion had once tried to destroy the pyramids, but they were unable to do it. It was made from an unknown metal that reflected their attacks back at them, leaving them seriously injured. And now, as the day of the lunar eclipse neared, an army of over 1,000 Artemians would be sent to Solterra and create a foothold on the Arcadia archipelago. 10 years later, after he had fully absorbed Callie's power and bloodline, he would become a celestial, allowing his people to invade Solterra. Raziel, once Callie has gained her new body, you will personally escort her back here to the palace. A handsome man, who seemed to only be in his late 20s, said in a commanding tone. You will also order your subordinates to build the foundation of our empire in Arcadia. From there, we will spread far and wide to conquer the nearby lands and make them bow to our will. Do this, and you will be rewarded. Fail, and you know what will happen to you, right? Yes, your majesty, Raziel replied. You may go. I want to see how Callie breaks after seeing her two loyal companions die in front of her. Once she has served her purpose, I will dispose of her and make sure that her mother will give birth to another child. The bloodline of the royal family of Chandria is so mysterious. I feel like after reaching the celestial rank, the other child would help me reach greater heights. The handsome man couldn't help but chuckle as he envisioned a future where he would rule not only Artem and Chandria, but Solterra as well. For that to happen, he needed to become a celestial first, allowing him to gain the power that would make him a force to reckon with. The handsome man then walked towards the balcony of his palace, where he could see the beautiful world of Solterra in the distance. A new conquest awaits me, the king of Artem said with a smile. Soon, another world will become mine. A few days later, just before sunset, 13 gathered all the wanderers together. All of you take one, 13 said as he handed wristbands to the teenage boys and girls who had come to answer his call. Wristbands. Kane arched an eyebrow. "Where did you get these, Brother Zion?" "Trade secret," 13 replied. "Since you already have one, can you move away? There are others who still haven't gotten theirs." Cain obeyed and walked away, and observed the wristband in his hand. At first, he just thought that it was an ordinary wristband, but after taking a good look at it, he noticed that there were words written in it. "Arcadia Survivor. Year 3024, Cain muttered as he looked at the wristband in surprise. The other wanderers also read what was written on the wristbands and felt something warm rise up to their chest. The words Arcadia Survivor meant that this accessory would serve as a memento of their first mission in Solterra. Many of the wanderers became emotional, and some even cried because they felt the message that the 10-year-old was trying to convey to them. Survive, and treat this mission as the stepping stone to a better and brighter future. They didn't know how many of them would be able to survive, but one thing was certain: they would do whatever it took to return to their families alive. One by one, the wanderers put on the wristbands and looked at 13 with eyes that had no intention of dying. "I want one too." Uncle Boo, who had also lined up, asked for a wristband. This will break after you transform." 13 blinked. "But sure. Here you go." The boy handed the beholder a wristband, which made Uncle Boo smile from ear to ear. "I will not wear this," Uncle Boo stated, "but I'll keep it with me as a good luck charm." "You believe in good luck charms?" 13 arched an eyebrow. "Whether I believe in it or not doesn't matter," Uncle Boo replied, "because we will need all the luck we can get right now," the beholder said as he looked in the distance. The tip of the pyramids were shining, which meant that the lunar eclipse would begin soon. "Everyone, we have been together for many weeks, and although the time we spent with each other wasn't that long, I believe that this memory I have with all of you will be with me for life," 13 stated. "I want all of you to remember this. Strength doesn't come from what you can do. It comes from overcoming the things that you thought you couldn't do. We are wanderers. Wherever we go, and no matter how long our journey is, there will come a time when our paths will cross each other. Not all those who wander are lost. Sometimes it just means that we are meant to wander so that we can bring others back home." 13 then raised his right hand, whose wrist was also wearing a wristband, and closed it into a fist before pressing it over his chest. "Our long journey has just begun. It is not our time to rest amongst the stars." All the wanderers clenched their fists as they stared at the boy, who was now acting as their leader with moist eyes. When a wanderer died, a shooting star would appear in the heavens of Pangea. A sight which was once beautiful was now treated as an ill omen by those who lived in the world because they knew that somewhere, out there, a wanderer had lost their life. So, 13's words hold great significance to them, making them believe that they would be able to see the sunrise when morning came. As if waiting for that moment, the two pyramids shot a beam of light towards each other, which intersected above the second island of the Arcadia archipelago. Slowly, but surely, a small gate was opening, which was the signal that after an hour, the people of Artem would descend upon the world. "Battle stations," 13 ordered, making all the wanderers and the monsters who had agreed to cooperate with them position themselves for a mad dash towards the gate of the moonlight. Uncle Boo and Albion transformed into their true forms, with the intention to save the person whom they loved and cared for the most in their lives. 13 stood in front of everyone with his arms crossed over his chest. He had a fearless look on his face and didn't seem the least bit scared of the monsters that would come to slaughter them all. He was the youngest and smallest among the teenage boys and girls. But at this time, everyone who was looking at his back felt that he was larger than life. As the gate slowly expanded, something caught everyone's attention. Beside 13, Shasha started glowing in a faint light. The 10-year-old gave his sister a sidelong glance before shifting his gaze back to the gate. He had already expected that his sister might become the candidate to become the Moon Princess because of two things. The first one was his mission. After leaving the Valbera archipelago, he met up with his brother, Mikhail, due to the contents of one of his trials. His 12th trial, which forced him to journey for months to reach the Arcadia archipelago, was another indicator. The moment he stepped foot into the island, he received his final mission: prevent the Moon Princess from getting corrupted. Before he was sent to Solterra, he had imparted the divine martial technique, Dance of the Moonlight, to his sister, so he was 90% certain that the person whom he must prevent from getting corrupted was none other than Shasha. The Wanderers, who had already been told about the sign of the Moon Princess candidate, looked at Shasha with complicated looks on their faces, especially the girls. Some of them were relieved because they weren't chosen to become Callie's next vessel. The rest, mostly the boys, pitied Shasha. For them, she was the perfect lady. Kind, strong, beautiful, and strong-willed. These were the qualities that any man would want for their partner in life. Taiga and Cain clenched their fists, for this turn of events was their greatest fear. Both of them secretly hoped that the young lady wouldn't be the candidate chosen to become the next Moon Princess and wanted her to safely escape this calamity. Uncle Boo and Albion also looked at Zion's sister with solemn expressions on their faces. Uncle Boo could only sigh in his heart. In his eyes, Shasha was the worst candidate for Moon Princess. Not only was she 13's sister, but he had also taken a liking to her. Albion, on the other hand, clenched his fists so hard that the beholder could hear cracking sounds beside him. "My sister is off limits." Those are the words that 13 had told him when he was still trapped in the treasury of the apocalypse. Now that the hateful boy sister had become the candidate, his original plan had to be revised. "I'll just focus on saving Callie first." Albion glared at the gate slowly forming in the distance. "Anyone who stands in my way will die." Shasha looked at her hands, which were glowing faintly, and narrowed her eyes. It was then that she heard her brother's voice, snapping her out of her daze. "Don't worry, Shasha," 13 said with his gaze still focused on the gate in front of him. "I promise that I'll protect you. So, you don't have to worry about anything." Shasha nodded before she, too, looked at the gate that was forming in the distance. The size of the gate was now over 100 meters, and everyone could tell that it would open any moment now. "Everyone, get ready," 13 ordered. "When I give the signal, you will run toward the gate of the moonlight that will appear somewhere on this island. Don't look back. Just run. We'll see each other in Pangea." "Yes," all the wanderers replied in unison, making the younger boy smile. High above the sky, Visago and Poca circled around 13's location, keeping an eye out for the appearance of the gate of the moonlight. Two gates would appear during the lunar eclipse. One was the gate from Artem, and the other was the gate from Chandria. The gate from Artem was purple, while the gate from Chandria was blue. After the gate from the invaders materialized, the gate from Chandria would also manifest at the same time. "They're coming," Uncle Boo shouted. "Everyone, brace yourselves." A few seconds after Uncle Boo made his announcement, a powerful shockwave spread out from the location where the purple gate was, sending gusts of wind flying in every direction. The purple gate then opened, and from it emerged the people 1619 of Artem, who stood 4 meters tall and were all wearing the purple gate then opened, and from it emerged the people of Artem, who stood 4 meters tall and were all wearing purple robes. Uncle Boo's and Albion's eyes widened in shock upon seeing something that they didn't expect. In the past lunar eclipses, only a little more than 100 warriors from Artem appeared on the island, yet that already gave the two of them a hard time. But now, there were not only just 100 of them rushing out of the purple gate. No, there were several hundred of them, and even the weakest warriors were rank 5 sovereigns. Surprised? A 4-meter-tall giant laughed as he passed through the gate. "You didn't see this coming, did you?" The commander of the invaders, who appeared in the Arcadia archipelago, was a rank 9 sovereign, and he went by the name Aramil. "My king wanted to pass a message to the two of you," Aramil stated. "Thank you for entertaining him once every decade. He also has a proposal. Why don't the two of you serve the Artemian Empire and become our slaves? If you accept, you will be allowed to spend 10 years with the princess before she kicks the bucket. Of course, you can refuse. That's fine as well. But we'll cut off that unicorn's head and display it in the royal palace, while we'll lock up that beholder to be used for experiments. Rejoice, for even in death, both of you will at least have worth. So what do you say?" "I say F***CKU. Uncle Boo, who had learned to curse from the Wanderers, shouted in anger. Albion, who also refused to yield, glared at Arameal with fury. "Well, I gave you a chance," Arameal smirked. "It's too late to regret your decision." Right behind Arameal, 6 rank 8 sovereigns appeared, making Uncle Boo's and Albion's faces contort in anger. Their enemies now numbered over 1,000, which was 10 times greater than the usual army that the Artemian Empire sent every lunar eclipse. "To this is too much." One of the Wanderers stuttered upon seeing that the number of enemies was far greater than any of them would have imagined. The other Wanderers were just as shocked, having expected that they would only need to escape from 100 Artemians. While escaping from 100 sovereigns was difficult, it was not impossible. However, with this many enemies going for the kill, their chances of escaping were nearly zero. But, just as everyone was about to fall into despair, a voice spread in the surroundings, making the Wanderers, as well as Callie's 2 protectors, look in his direction. "The gate has appeared," 13 said in a calm tone, as if the appearance of thousands of sovereigns wasn't a big deal to him. "It is 10 miles to the east." The 10-year-old then pointed in the direction where Visego saw the gate from the sky. "Blackie, Hercules, lead them all to the gates," 13 ordered. "You already know what to do, right?" Blackie barked, while Hercules screeched. 13 nodded before glancing at the Wanderers behind him. "What are you all waiting for?" 13 asked with a smile. "Start running." Blackie barked at the Wanderers before running away. Hercules screeched and followed behind his friend, snapping the Wanderers, as well as the monsters, who had gathered on the island, to all run at the same time. A monster stampede composed of rank 5 monsters and above started, and all of them were headed to the blue pillar of light in the distance. Arameal glanced at the fleeing humans and monsters before shifting his gaze to the beautiful young lady, whose body was glowing brightly in the darkness. "The sacrifices are running away," Arameal stated. "Kill them all." The warriors of Artem roared as they followed their commander's orders. Some of them had seen this scene countless times in the past, and it all ended in a one-sided massacre. "Follow me," the captain of a squad of warriors shouted. He was a rank 6 sovereign, and he was part of the original invaders who descended to the Arcadia archipelago every 10 years. The captain had only managed to run a few dozen meters when he saw a blur out of the corner of his eye. A second later, blood splattered in the surroundings as the captain of the warriors found his chest pierced by a tree. He could only stare at the sky, unable to move, for he had been pinned in place. What? That was his last word before death, not even knowing how he died. On a mountaintop, Lady Ariel, who was Adira's master, their branch manager, and the commander of the Order of Raziel, laughed. "For a moment, I thought that these otherworlders are very tough," Lady Ariel said. "But since they can bleed, they can die as well. Everyone, make sure not to slack off, okay? This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance, so make sure to enslave as many of these bastards as possible." Norris and the other slave masters, who were under Lady Ariel's command, all stepped forward with anxious looks on their faces. Which is worse? Norris, the slave master who had befriended 13, asked the drow beside him. "The fight against Arundel, or this one?" "First time," Adira asked back with a grin. "I don't really participate in wars, you know," Norris complained. "So, which is worse?" "The fight with Arundel was worse," Adira answered as she summoned her dark bow. "Compared to that fight, this is just a walk in the park for Zion." Lady Ariel laughed as she raised her hand, making one of the trees that the Wanderers had sharpened to perfection float above her head. She was a throne, and she possessed a very deadly and unique ability. The commander of the Order of Raziel could increase the weight of anything she touched and launch it as a projectile. Of course, there was a limitation. She could only increase the weight of the object up to 15 tons. Anything above, that was impossible for her. But with tens of thousands of sharpened trees at her disposal, Lady Ariel felt invincible. Soon, dozens of trees descended upon the Artemian army, as 13th reinforcements went for the kill. Arameal, who didn't expect that there would be other forces on the island, frowned as his gaze locked onto the body of the commander of the Order of Raziel. "Half of you, kill those pests," Raziel ordered the 6 rank 8 sovereigns behind him. The other half, secure that girl over there and bring her to me. Captains of each squad, what are you waiting for? Start the slaughter and eliminate all of those who dare to oppose our Artemian empire. Yes, sir. The Artemians divided themselves into 3 groups. Some went after the Wanderers. The others targeted the reinforcements 13 had called to join him, while the rest charged in Shasha's direction with the intention of capturing her alive. High above their heads, the moon of Chandria had started undergoing the first phase of a total lunar eclipse. This phenomenon would end in exactly 1 hour, which was the time limit for Raziel to capture Shasha and have her merge with Kali, who would appear once the eclipse had progressed halfway. Master, we should take Shasha and run. Taiga proposed. Yes, brother. Cain, who was feeling anxious, supported Taiga's words. We need to run away now. Run away? 13 blinked in confusion. Why should we run away? Why? Of course, we need to run away. Taiga, who was very tempted to hold Shasha and a princess carry and run as fast as he could, rested his hands on the younger boy's shoulder. Master, 3 rank 8 sovereigns are headed in our direction. They also have rank 6 and rank 7 sovereigns with them. Brother, let's escape. Cain insisted. Uncle Boo and this unicorn will not be able to stop them. Both of you calm down. 13 swatted Taiga's hands off his shoulders as if he was swatting away a fly. Shasha, did you practice during the lunar eclipse in Pangea 2 years ago? Shasha nodded. Yes. Do you have a good grasp of it now? 13 inquired. Shasha nodded for a second time, which made the 10-year. Old smile. Can you feel the resonance? I can. Shasha hadn't felt it a few minutes ago. But when the lunar eclipse started, a familiar feeling resonated within her body, making her feel more confident in what she was about to do. On a small hill overlooking the battlefield, a beautiful woman stood, looking at the battlefield in front of her. After her gaze landed on 13 and Shasha, she took a deep breath before soaring toward the sky. It had been a while since she last fought in a large-scale battle, but she wasn't afraid. Right now, something important to her was on the line, so she wouldn't hesitate to go all out. All she wanted was to make the people whom she cared about smile despite the hardships that they were facing in Solterra. The Wanderers, on the other hand, were running with all of their might, alongside the monsters who were headed in the same direction as them. 13 told them that the Artemians would prioritize hunting the monsters before them because they needed to use the blood of strong monsters to empower the ritual that they were about to do. I'm glad we ran every day, one of the Wanderers said, thankful that he was able to run at a good pace despite not having received any proper training while growing up. The other Wanderers nodded in agreement, because they also felt that they would be able to reach their destination if the Artemians didn't target them right away. The gate manifested a bit far, so it would take them some time to reach their destination. However, after seeing the flying logs that they had personally cut down pierce the bodies of the Artemians running after them, a sense of pride rose in their chest, making them run faster than ever before. From a distance, Lady Raziel frowned. She could no longer provide cover for the Wanderers because there was a small army headed in their direction. It's too early to use our secret weapons, Lady Raziel thought as she shot dozens of logs toward the rank 8 sovereigns leading the group of Artemians running after the Wanderers. She knew that there were risks in joining 13's battle, but if they managed to pull it off, great rewards would also fall on their heads. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, Lady Raziel mused. That boy, Zion, really knows how to negotiate with a businesswoman like me. Adira was releasing one arrow after the other, while Norris raised his hand to summon a rank 6 alpha monster, which he had recently enslaved. The Order of Raziel had faced many hard battles in the past, but this was the first time that they were fighting invaders from the moon that they always looked at during the night. While his reinforcements were preparing to clash with their enemies, 13 had just finished his conversation with Shasha. Very well. 13 pointed at the giants running in their direction. Show them the dance of the moonlight. Shasha closed her eyes. Looking at her, Taiga and Cain felt like the brother and sister pair had gone crazy. A moment later, a dozen shadows that looked exactly like Shasha appear behind her. Taiga and Cain looked at this scene in awe, but what happened next made their eyes widen in shock. Dozens of golden swords made of light materialized and moved counterclockwise behind Shasha and her shadow clones, making them look as if they were celestial beings. Secure the princess candidate, one of the rank 8 sovereigns who had come to capture Shasha, ordered. Feel free to kill everyone else. Although he had seen that the young lady was exhibiting a strange power, he wasn't too worried about it. After all, what could a weak human girl possibly do against them? But when they were only hundreds of meters away from Shasha, countless golden swords rained down upon them from the sky. These golden swords didn't come from Shasha, which made the Artemians look in the direction where it was coming from. Do you really think that I just watch as my daughter gets kidnapped right under my nose? Alessia asked in a tone filled with killing intent as she hovered in the sky. Just like Shasha, there were a dozen shadow clones of Alessia hovering behind her. The dance of the moonlight and the dance of Solaris were a pair. When they were together on the battlefield, a resonance would take place, allowing both of them to use the power of the other. Shasha was still not a rookie, so it was impossible for her to use the power of her martial technique. But even if she were a rookie, her rank would still be too low to manifest the complete dance of the moonlight. However, there was a condition that would allow her to use its true might regardless of her rank. And that condition was an eclipse. For the dance of the moonlight, a lunar eclipse was needed. For the dance of Solaris, a total solar eclipse was required. But if the two wielders of these two martial techniques were together, and there was an eclipse, both of them would be able to unleash their martial techniques' core abilities, making them a force to reckon with. Alessia and her clones landed beside her children and smiled. Zion, will you be able to return after this? Alessia asked her son, not caring about the horde of angry Artemians headed in their direction. It was as if she was only asking her son what he wanted for dinner. Having witnessed this, Taiga and Cain felt as if their common sense was being tested. Yes, mother, 13 replied. I can go home after this mission ends. Good. Alessia nodded. Remy misses you terribly. Don't worry. I left your father to look after her. I miss her too. 13 took out his bow from his spatial storage and placed a quiver of arrows behind his back. Let's get this over with so that we can all go home. Shasha and Alessia both unleashed the power of their martial techniques, launching countless golden swords that had grown to the size of street lamps. Not daring to underestimate the power of the golden swords, the 3 rank 8 sovereigns erected a barrier in front of them, tanking the ridiculous attack that they were seeing for the first time in their life. Uncle Boo and Albion, who were now in their true forms, also unleashed a barrage of their long-distance attacks, forcing the Artemians to go on the defensive. What kind of power is this? Raziel, who was watching the Moon Princess candidates battle from a distance, frowned. He had extended his senses to observe the golden swords that were raining down on his subordinates. Each of those swords can instantly kill a rank 4 sovereign, Raziel thought. But that woman is only the Grandmaster rank. How could she possibly summon so many golden swords? Also, even though the princess candidate is still very young, she can unleash the same attack with the same destructive power. This shouldn't be possible. The more Raziel thought about it, the more confused he became. A minute had passed since the barrage of the golden sword started, but Shasha and Alessia showed no signs of running out of steam. Usually, an attack of such magnitude would drain the wielder of their stamina and strength at a rapid pace, making it impossible to use for long periods of time. And yet, the two looked too composed, and there was no sign of exhaustion on their faces. In fact, both of them were even chatting, sharing views on how to break the Artemians' defense, as if discussing what to cook for dinner. Knowing that this couldn't continue any longer, Raziel snapped his fingers. A booming sound spread in the surroundings as the purple gate behind the Artemian commander released more warriors from their homeworld. Originally, he thought that bringing over 1,000 warriors was already an overkill. But seeing the current situation, he realized that some variables outside of their control had appeared. There were over 5,000 warriors who were supposed to arrive in the Arcadian archipelago in batches. They would build their fortress on the island, which would become their base of operations before they expanded outward. Little did he know that Callie had already shared all of this information with 13, allowing the boy to plan beforehand. If his opponents wanted to play dirty, then 13 would play dirtier and make them understand that they were dealing with someone who had mastered the art of playing dirty. Go! Raziel ordered the second batch of warriors to attack without mercy. Get the Moon Princess candidate. Over 1,000 warriors headed toward Shasha with determined looks on their faces. The ground trembled, comparable to a small earthquake, as they collectively rushed toward their target. But they had only managed to run halfway to the first batch when the ground under their feet gave way, revealing a sinkhole. Some of the Artemians fell on the sinkhole, but there were others who managed to jump over it at the last second. Suddenly, one of the warriors who had fallen into the hole suddenly flew out of it, blood gushing out of his nose and mouth. A moment later, the Ogre King from the Valbera archipelago jumped out of the hole and swatted all the Artemians within his range. You guys are too impatient. The Tigerkin King jumped out of the sinkhole and also started to smack everyone in the surroundings. I've been itching for a fight. Arthas, who is now a throne, slashed the Artemian in front of him. Just as he was about to attack the enemy closest to him, the ground burst open, and the new Troll King pierced the Artemian's head, making Arthas chuckle. Fine, I'll look for others to kill. Arthas, who is now the Barbarian King, distanced himself from the Ogre King, the Tiger King, and the Troll King. You bastards, a rank 7 sovereign shouted in anger. However, before he could help his subordinates, the ground under him collapsed. Fortunately, he was prepared, so, the moment it happened, he was able to jump upward. But even though he did, a giant figure rose up from the ground and grabbed his legs. The Artemian captain looked down and screamed in fright when he saw the devil-horned honey badger, whose jaws were wide open and about to bite his waist. A pang of excruciating pain washed over his senses as Cranky pulled him down underground, where the honey badger would ensure that his prey wouldn't be able to escape from him. 13 promised him that he could eat to his fill, and what better food could he eat than powerful monsters that he had never tasted before? Ogres, tigerkins, barbarians, and trolls emerge from the holes that suddenly appear in the ground and work together to start a one-sided massacre. The Artemians were caught off guard by this sudden ambush, which broke their battle formation. Raziel roared in anger because enough was enough. Moon Domain. The commander of the Artemian army activated his domain, which would double the strength and fighting prowess of his army. But just as the domain was about to envelop the entire battlefield, cracks appeared on it, making Raziel's eyes turn bloodshot. A few seconds later, his domain shattered, making him cough out a mouthful of blood due to backlash. I've always wanted to try that once. A voice filled with arrogance reached Raziel's ears, making him turn to look at the old man who was holding a great sword in his right hand. Not too shabby, right? The patriarch of the Leventus clan, Arthur Leventus, sneered as he looked at the rank 9 sovereign with a fearless gaze. He had long wished to become a monarch, and one of the requirements to qualify as such was to kill a rank 9 sovereign. Arthur was just a throne. In order to win against a rank 9 sovereign, the assistance of at least 5 more thrones was needed. But the old man was as cunning as he was strong. He purposely waited for Raziel to unleash his domain before breaking it using the ability of his mythical equipment. 13's grandpa was pissed off when 13 didn't invite him to the Valbera archipelago to fight Arundel and his army. He thought that he had lost the opportunity to become a monarch just because he didn't treat his no-good grandson's family better. Since then, he paid extra attention to Mikhail's, Shasha's, and Remy's situation, making sure that they received the best supplements and training materials that their family could offer. He did all this, hoping that Zion, who was still in Solterra, would find himself in a difficult situation, similar to his battle with Arundel. E/N. Repeat those words to yourself, old man. Is that right? Arthur hoped that his grandson would invite him then. Fortunately, his prayers were answered. 13 had asked the Order of Raziel to deliver a letter to Michael, which he would certainly deliver to Arthur. He laid out a plan in which he could bring the powerhouses of the Leventis family to the Arcadia archipelago to participate in a battle, which would give Arthur a chance to realize his goal. Well then, time to fight, Arthur sneered. It is high time that I become a monarch. Arameal roared in anger because he didn't like the way Arthur was looking at him. The old man was looking at him like a prey that was about to get consumed, which triggered the Artemian commander to go all out and show him that an inferior creature didn't stand a chance against him. "B, brother, you're amazing," Cain exclaimed after seeing the reinforcements that suddenly appeared out of nowhere. He originally thought that they were already goners, but seeing the unknown monster army helping them, as well as the other adults fighting alongside them, he was starting to believe that they had a chance to win. Shasha and Alessia, whose powers resonated with each other, were like unstoppable magical artillery, continuously shooting out golden swords that were as strong as Lady Ariel's 15-ton projectiles. On the contrary, 13, who was observing the battlefield with his arms crossed over his chest, wasn't as optimistic as Cain. He understood that the Artemians wouldn't allow themselves to fail their mission. With that said, they should be sending more reinforcements, which would soon number in the thousands. "By the way, Cain," 13 said, "why are you still here? Shouldn't you be running toward the gate of the moonlight?" "Brother, just who do you think I am?" Cain replied with a face filled with injustice. "Since Shasha is still not safe, I will remain here. I won't go through the gate unless she goes through the gate with me." Taiga, who was also standing beside Cain, clicked his tongue but didn't say anything. His current master didn't tell him about the reinforcements that arrived, but a glance was enough for him to figure out that they consisted of members of the Order of Raziel and the warriors of the Valbera archipelago. Truth be told, he already had an idea about how the 10-year-old was able to achieve such a feat. It also explained the number of times 13 had left the Arcadia archipelago and disappeared for days on end. He had been making preparations in the background alone, keeping friends and allies alike in the dark. The younger boy looked at the blue moon in the sky. Seeing the progress of its eclipse, he knew that there were still a few minutes before it reached the halfway mark. Once that happened, the intensity of the battle would increase. At that time, the Artemians would realize that the current forces they had at the Arcadia archipelago would not be enough to complete their mission. "Shasha, no matter what happens later, don't panic," 13 said. "Trust me, okay?" "Yes, Zion," Shasha replied as she glanced at her brother with a smile. "I trust you." Suddenly, a screech sounded from the sky, making 13 glance at Poca, who had just given him an updated report of the current situation on the battlefield. The boy's face turned solemn, having been informed that his trump cards were starting to move to perform the missions that he had asked of them. "It's still too early," 13 thought, which means it has already reached that stage. 13 sighed internally, but since there was nothing he could do, he screeched back to let Poca know that he received her report properly. Phoebe, Herman, Rayon, Rio, and Lambert ran alongside the other wanderers with determined expressions on their faces. They were still a distance away from their destination, and yet the Artemians were closing in on them at a rapid pace. The reinforcement that had given them cover fire earlier was currently being targeted by a small army, forcing them to deal with that threat first. This left the Wanderers and the other monsters, who were running toward the gate of the moonlight, to handle things on their own. "Just run," Rayon shouted. "Do everything in your power to cross that gate." All the Wanderers nodded their heads in understanding as they continued to run. But a second later, a loud explosion erupted in front of them, and a leading pack of monsters was sent flying to the side of their formation. "This little game is over," an Artemian holding a fireball in his hand laughed. "Become sacrifices for the glory of our king." The other Artemians, who were capable of long-distance attacks, also unleashed a barrage toward the monsters and the teenagers, who didn't stop desperately running for their lives. But just as these attacks were about to land on their designated targets, giant spears emerged from the ground and dispersed them completely. Rayon and the other wanderers thought that they were already goners, but the sudden appearance of the spears reignited the hopes in their hearts. "Run along now, children." A handsome man fixed his glasses as he stood at the side of the path. "The Leventis family will handle them." Rayon, Herman, Lambert, Rio, Phoebe, and Miriam, as well as the other wanderers, recognized a man wearing glasses because he was one of the most important people in Pangea. Michael Leventis, Rayon muttered, the right-hand man of Arthur Leventis. What is the Leventis family doing here? Lambert's eyes widened in shock. How can they possibly be here? Wanderers who go to Solterra for the first time are usually sent to places far from any human kingdom, Herman stated. This is to prevent powerful families from assisting their bloodline in completing their mission. I've memorized the known maps of Solterra, but this Arcadia archipelago wasn't located within the human kingdoms. That can only mean one thing. This place is so remote that no ordinary person can reach it. But they did, Rio commented. I can only think of one person who can do it. All the wanderers didn't need to be a genius to guess who was responsible for bringing the unexpected reinforcements that suddenly appeared on the battlefield. This only cemented their assumption that Zion had done something during the days when he wasn't on the island. I'm just glad they are here, Herman stated. There's simply no way we can survive this without them. Michael glanced at the powerful army that was almost upon them before fixing his glasses a second time. Leventis Corps, move out, Michael ordered. Suddenly, hundreds of people emerged from the trees and unleashed a barrage of spells, arrows, and other projectiles toward the incoming army. Mr. Glasses, allow us to support you. A lady, who seemed to be in her late 20s, said with a smile as she appeared a few meters away from Michael. Silent Watchers, engage, the lady ordered. Phantom Force, go for the kill, a middle-aged man commanded as he stood on top of a tree. Wolf Crew, it's time to hunt, a man wearing a wolf robe shouted. Tiger Cartel, make sure to loot as many as you can. A woman wearing seductive clothes closed the fan she was holding in her hand and pointed it at the Artemian army. Don't forget to capture a few slaves, too. We don't want Ariel to gain all the good stuff. When 13 asked the branch of the Order of Raziel, headed by Lady Ariel, for help, he didn't expect that the commander of the Shadow Union would ask the other branches to participate in this battle. All in all, 10 branches of the Order of Raziel were mobilized, and each of them was led by a throne. These unexpected circumstances surprised the 10-year-old, but he was more than happy to have them in this battle, which was happening in a secluded part of Solterra that was still uncharted by the human kingdoms. 13 had used Rocky's upgraded mobile fortress to bring in 500 people at a time, which he dumped in secret locations throughout the second island. He made many return trips in order to accommodate all of these powerful individuals from the underworld, who only came because of their trust in Ariel. The Order of Raziel was a tight-knit group of people. Their commanders were all close friends. And since one of them asked for help, those who were nearest the Shadow Union branch answered her call. Soon, the Artemian army that originally targeted the fleeing wanderers was forced to engage the forces of 4 thrones, buying the wanderers precious time to increase the distance between them and the army, whose formations had started to break apart. There was a small elite group of Artemians that separated from their formation to continue their pursuit of the fleeing wanderers. Their captain had the ability to use group teleport, allowing them to teleport anywhere within 2 miles in any direction. 50 Artemians, led by a rank 7 sovereign, appeared at the front of the monster stampede, blocking their path to escape. Monsters were stronger and faster than wanderers, so they took the lead, while the teenage boys and girls were at the rear of their formation. Lowly creatures, just accept your fate and allow yourselves to be sacrificed, the rank 7 sovereign shouted. Kill them. The Artemians charged forward, with their armor glowing in a bright light. This light increased their strength for a period of time, giving them the confidence to annihilate the monster stampede. At least, that was what they originally believed. When the 2 forces were about to clash, the ground under their feet gave way, and they all fell into a ditch. This ditch was only 3 meters deep, and the Artemians were 4 meters tall. Due to how sudden the situation was, they were unable to react in time and got trampled by the monster stampede. Blackie, who was leading the pack, barked, telling the monsters behind him to gang-bang the fallen Artemians. All of them were rank 5 monsters and above, so they weren't any weaker than the Artemians. Because of this, they trampled, mauled, bit, slashed, and shredded the arrogant invaders who must have thought that they were dealing with low-ranked monsters. While the monsters were attacking the Artemians trapped in the ditch, Rocky was also attacking them from below ground. Of course, he focused his attention on the rank 7 sovereign, which was the strongest of them all. As long as he could contain their captain, Blackie and the other monsters would handle the rest. 13 had also taken into consideration that, when the battle started, the Artemians would divide their forces to handle the different variables that would pop up across the battlefield. But the boy also considered one important factor, and that was the arrogance of the Artemians. For them, any creature born in Solterra was a lowly creature who couldn't measure up to their might. Unfortunately, they had greatly underestimated the number and strength of the monsters of the Arcadian archipelago, who didn't hesitate to engage them in battle. Dying screams reverberated in the surroundings as Giga went on a rampage and smashed every Artemian within his reach. When he fought against Arundel, he was clearly outmatched. In his dying moments, the one thing he regretted was being too weak to help Zion. So when the two of them had a heart-to-heart talk, the Blaze Skunk asked his master to make him stronger. 13 agreed. Instead of allowing Giga to break through to the next rank and become a rank 6 monster, he made the skunk clear certain conditions, allowing him to evolve into a sovereign. A rank 5 sovereign was just as strong as a rank 6 alpha monster, and the path that the 10-year-old had chosen for one of his best friends was the path of the sovereign. But Giga wasn't just an ordinary sovereign. He was a mutated sovereign who had drunk the blood and eaten the meat of a rank 9 fire dragon, making him stronger than ordinary monsters with the same rank as him. He was still weaker than the rank 7 captain of the Artemians, but it didn't matter. After all, he wasn't fighting him in a one-on-one battle. He was fighting him with his allies, who had faced Arundel alongside him. Hercules was like a juggernaut who smashed against the rank 7 monster's head, breaking the captain's teeth. The obsidian tiger beetle wasn't a monster that specialized in attacks. No, it was a monster that specialized in defense. But thanks to its ability, Roadrunner, it was able to run at great speeds. Using the built-up momentum, it would ram itself against any target, making them feel as if they were hit by a bullet train. Blackie, who specialized in speed, bit on the Artemian captain's neck, holding him in place. Giga then activated his ability, Titan's Heart, and transformed into a 7-meter-tall blaze skunk. The three friends had coordinated their time perfectly. At the same time that Blackie bit on the captain's neck, Giga's blaze was only 2 seconds away from descending on the captain's head. A split second before the moment of impact, Blackie backed off, so that he wouldn't be caught in the aftermath of one of Giga's strongest close combat abilities. It was none other than the Gigatin Smash, which was imbued with the flames of a fire dragon. A second later, a cracking sound was heard, followed by a dying scream as blazing flames spread in the surroundings. Giga didn't take any chances and unleashed consecutive Gigatin Smash until the captain's head turned into a burning meat paste. No, spare me. Stop. I order you to stop. I'm an Artemian. I won't die here. I can't die here. You lowly monsters. Damn you all. The cries fell on deaf ears as the monsters continued their rampage, not showing a shred of mercy. When the Wanderers caught up with the monster army, all they saw was the bloody bodies of the Artemians being eaten by the monsters. Giga gave the rank 7 sovereign core to Hercules, while he and Blackie tore off some meat from the foe they had killed. They had no idea what the Artemians tasted like, so the two decided to have a taste. After chewing a few times, the skunk and the hound spat at the same time and looked at the dead body in disdain. This F***'s flesh tastes like that poisonous toad that we tried to eat last time, Blackie barked. Yes, Giga growled. Absolutely disgusting. After the two of them finished giving their criticisms about the taste of the Artemian captain, Giga gestured to the Wanderers to keep running. They still had plenty of distance to cover, and, judging by their speed, it would take them at least half an hour more to reach the pillar of blue light in the distance. 13 had asked them to accompany the Wanderers and ensure that they were safe. The trolls and the ogres were inside Rocky's mobile fortress, ready to assist in case they needed backup. They weren't really made for long-distance marathons, so they were hitching a ride in the Magma Balboa, ready to assist their friends at a moment's notice. Although they weren't saying anything, all of them who had fought against Arundel could feel it in the air. Something very dangerous and deadly was looming in the heavens above. Feeling anxious, Giga urged the Wanderers to increase their pace so that he could return to his master's side before something outside of 13's calculations took place. "I'm never going to join this kind of mission again," the slave master, Norris, commented as he forcefully enslaved a rank 6 Artemian, which had been knocked unconscious by Adira and her team. "Stop complaining and start enslaving." Adira, who was busy providing cover for the slave master, replied. "Done," Norris shouted as he gave the fallen Artemian a slap on his face. "Wake up and protect me at all costs." The Artemian tried to fight off the enslavement magic, but it was of no use. The enslavement seal Norris had used on the capture warrior wasn't the same seal he used on the monsters that he sold other people. It was a slave seal made by Norris Master, a throne who specialized in enslaving magic. Any monster rank 7 and below would not be able to break free from it. The other slave masters, who were also fighting on the island, had several ready-made seals like Norris. Their goal in this war was to capture as many high-ranking Artemians as possible and use them as their organization's personal slaves. Norris Master was also on the battlefield, happily collecting one slave after the other. He even wanted to thank Lady Auriel for inviting him to such a bountiful harvest, where he managed to acquire slaves that didn't belong in Solterra. Ferdinand.com. The Order of Raziel didn't help 13 out of charity. All of them had their own reasons for coming. Only Lady Auriel was genuinely helping the 10-year-old because the Domini Mortis had chosen him to become her master. 13 had also been honest with her and warned her of the dangers that might happen as the lunar eclipse progressed. He also shared this information with the other branch leaders who decided to join the fight in the Arcadia archipelago. They knew the risk involved, so they specially made contingency plans just in case the worst-case scenario happened. In fact, all of them would not hesitate to sprint toward the Gate of the Moonlight if things suddenly turned south, running off with the gains they acquired during the battle. 13 was paying close attention to the war, as well as the progress of the lunar eclipse in the heavens. When the eclipse finally reached the halfway mark, a bright light appeared hundreds of meters above the purple gate that belonged to the Artemians. Uncle Boo and Albion looked at that light, knowing what it signified. When the light receded, a transparent golden orb appeared, and inside it was a young lady who seemed to be around 15 or 16 years old. This teenage girl was none other than Callie. With her appearance, Albion instantly disappeared from where he stood. The unicorn teleported consecutively in order to reach the person whom he cared about the most. Uncle Boo also wanted to go, but he knew that he wouldn't be able to travel as fast as the unicorn. It might even drag them down if he accompanied Albion in his attempt to rescue Callie. 13's and Alessia's gazes turned solemn when the Moon Princess finally made her appearance. The 10-year-old knew that the Artemians had already met one of the conditions to conduct the ceremony, but it was not the one they expected. In order to make Callie appear and make the ceremony successful, they needed to offer blood sacrifices from powerful monsters. However, the monsters who had been offered as sacrifices weren't the monsters on the island, but the Artemians themselves. 13's strategy caught them completely by surprise. Although his allies suffered serious injuries, none of them had died yet because the preparations they made prevented the Artemians from getting an advantage over them. Simply put, the Artemians were ill-prepared for their current circumstances. They were used to being the hunters, not the ones being hunted by their foes. All of them thought that the only threat they would be facing was Albion and Uncle Boo, whom they had already battled many times in the past. They had prepared more than enough warriors to deal with the two beasts, but not enough manpower against the fierce welcome they received after they descended on the Arcadia archipelago. "Callie," Albion shouted as he teleported dozens of meters away from the transparent golden orb that served as the Moon Princess prison. Hearing his voice, the young lady slowly opened her eyes. A sad smile appeared on her face the moment her gaze landed on the unicorn, whom she missed dearly. But just as Albion was about to reach her, something blocked his path. This farce needs to end. An Artemian with two gray angelic wings on his back stated in a cold tone before punching the unicorn's face, sending Albion crashing towards the ground. The ongoing battles came to a brief pause when everyone sensed a powerful presence appear on the island. *T. Lady Aurelia cursed internally after seeing the newcomer on the battlefield. Zion said that there was a small chance that this was going to happen, but it really did happen. The other branch managers immediately ordered their subordinates to regroup as they glanced at the High Archon, whose presence would affect the outcome of the battlefield. /N. High Archon is the counterpart of a Magian prince or princess. This only applies to monsters of the same rank. Well, you can treat this as a form of victory. After all, you succeeded in forcing our hand. Another High Archon stepped out of the purple gate with a sneer on his face. We weren't supposed to come here, but since we can't afford to let this ceremony fail, our king sent us to handle the rest. Just think of it as having bad luck. The only thing you can do now is hope that in your next life, you will not suffer the same fate. Even so, all of you should be honored, for I, Raziel, had personally come to kill all of you. No need to thank me. Isn't that right, Your Excellency, Raziel? Raziel made an exaggerated bow to the High Archon, who had punched Albion away from the golden orb that served as the Moon Princess prison. Yes, Raziel, who served as the King of Artem's right-hand man, replied. Anyone who dares to defy our empire will face the consequences of their actions. The purple gate glowed once again, and with it, 4 rank 9 sovereigns appeared. Raziel, who was the commander of the invading force, was also a rank 9 sovereign. With the addition of 2 High Archons and 4 more rank 9 powerhouses, the balance of the battle immediately tilted in the Artemians' favor. Raziel's gaze then landed on the beautiful young lady, whose body was glowing faintly in the distance. A very fine vessel, Raziel said with a smile. Maybe you will last more than a decade before you wither away like the other Moon Princess candidates who had come before you. After saying those words, the High Archon of Artem touched the golden orb and used his authority over it. Callie's body shuddered, and her eyes suddenly went blank. A moment later, she started to sing, a sad song that made Shasha, who was fighting with everything she had, suddenly fall into a trance. Her shadow clones all dispersed as her connection with them disappeared. Alessia, who noticed what had happened to her daughter, was suddenly pushed back by the Artemians, whom she was holding back earlier. Now that the deadly bombardment's effectiveness was reduced by half, they no longer had anything to fear because no one would be able to stop the inevitable. Shasha's body slowly rose up from the ground as if she were being pulled toward the singing girl, who would soon take over her body and use it as her new vessel. I won't let you. Uncle Boo roared through telepathy and flew toward Shasha. Using his telekinesis, the beholder forcefully took the young lady away and flew toward the direction of the Gate of the Moonlight. Right now, it was impossible for him to get close to Callie. However, he believed that if he took Shasha away, there was a chance that the powerhouses of the Artemian Empire would change their target to him, buying Albion a bit of time to save Callie and escape. Just as he intended, the Artemians prioritized targeting him. Raziel and the 4 rank 9 sovereigns that accompanied him were now flying after the fleeing beholder. Rank 9 Artemians and above had the ability to fly, making them look like deities in the eyes of their people. Only the High Archon, Raziel, stayed back. His priority was to keep Callie safe and prevent the unicorn from attempting to whisk her away right under his noose. Master, what are we going to do? Taiga asked. They're after Shasha. Brother, is there anything I can do to help? Cain inquired. As long as it will save Shasha, I'll do anything. The two of you can't do anything, 13 replied as he glanced in the direction where Uncle Boo had fled. If you want to do something, make sure that you stay alive because this is far from over. Glancing at the lunar eclipse, 13 knew that even if Uncle Boo flew as fast as he could, the Artemians would still be able to catch up to him. Zion, what now? Alessia asked anxiously. Don't worry, Mother, 13 answered. I'll keep Shasha safe. I promised her, so I will do just that. For the time being, take Taiga and Cain away from here. I won't go, Master. Taiga insisted. I know you have a plan, so I'm willing to help you even if it's dangerous. Me too, brother, Cain stated. I won't leave until she's safe. 13 shook his head. The two of you will only just get in the way. If you really want to help save Shasha, go with Mother and help her with what she is about to do. Hearing the firmness in his tone, Taiga and Cain glanced at each other with resignation. Zion, just answer me this, Alessia said softly. Shasha will be safe, right? She will come back home, right? 13 nodded. Yes. She will come back safe, Mother. I promise. After her son's assurance, Alessia ordered 2 of her clones to grab hold of Taiga and Cain so that she could carry out the next phase of Zion's plan. When his mother was no longer in sight, 13's face turned solemn because the current situation had exceeded his expectations. He had taken into account the appearance of a high archon, which was as strong as a Magian prince. However, he didn't expect that there would be 2 of them, not to mention that they had also brought 4 rank 9 sovereigns with them as well. The moment these powerhouses arrived, the Order of Raziel made their retreat. They agreed to help out of their own interests, but fighting against these powerful monsters wasn't something they signed up for. They understood that the enemy would prioritize the ceremony, so they planned to use this opportunity to make their escape. During their stay on the second island, they had dug countless underground tunnels, which they planned to use as their escape routes when something beyond their control transpired. Suddenly, a shadow rose up behind 13 and grabbed him without warning. Zion, let's go, Adira stated. We need to escape here. It's a lost cause already. Perfect timing, Lady Adira, 13 said. I will need your help to do something. The drow suddenly felt a cold shiver run down her spine when she saw the 10-year-old's expression. The last time you asked me to do something, I had the biggest scare of my life, Adira commented. You're not planning on doing anything dangerous, right? Of course not, 13 smiled. I just want you to bring me as close to that golden orb in the sky as possible. The drow pinched the bridge of her nose because she already knew that the boy was planning to take on a suicidal mission once again. Zion, do you think we can escape the senses of that thing? Adira pointed at Raziel, who was hovering beside the golden orb. That's a high archon, the same rank as Arundel. Are you insane? I'm very sane, 13 replied calmly. Trust me, Lady Adira. There is nothing more sane than me on this battlefield right now. Tiona, who was coiled on the boy's neck, nodded her head in agreement. The high archons will be distracted later, so they won't have the leeway to pay attention to ants like us, 13 explained. If you really think that it's too dangerous, you can just leave me behind. Adira clicked her tongue before carrying the boy in a princess carry. I just need to get as close to that thing as possible, right? Adira asked. 13 nodded. Yes. I better not die here, Zion, Adira complained. If I do, I'll be haunting you for eternity. 13 didn't reply because he knew that this was indeed a risky move. But there was no other way to do it. He only had one chance, and if he failed, not only would he lose his sister, but he would also probably lose his life as well. Uncle Boo, who had secured Shasha, was flying as fast as he could. But his pursuers were faster than him, and it was only a matter of time before they finally caught up. The only reason why they weren't attacking him directly was due to the fact that they might accidentally kill the Moon Princess candidate who was in his possession. Uncle Boo knew this very much, so he had the advantage. As long as Shasha was with him, his enemies would think twice before they moved in for the kill. But just as he was thinking along these lines, 2 of the tentacles on his head were cut off, making him grimace in pain. This small window of opportunity wasn't missed by Raziel, who was a high archon like Raziel. With a speed that was as fast as the speed of sound, the high archon arrived right beside Uncle Boo and severed the tentacle that held Shasha in place. After that, he punched the beholder's face, making Uncle Boo screech in pain as he crashed toward the ground. I have secured the Moon Princess vessel, Raziel said to his subordinates as he looked at the young lady in his hand. Let us return to Ark. Something fast and powerful hit the side of his face, making him lose his grip on Shah, who was now falling to the ground. But a few seconds later, a blur appeared and caught the falling teenager before landing on a mountain a distance away. "Who are you?" Raziel spat a mouthful of blood as he looked hatefully at the monster who suddenly attacked him out of nowhere. "Me," a demi-human bat asked with a smile. "Just a death bat who happened to just fly over this island. It seemed that something interesting was happening, so I decided to take a look and join in the fun." Kama-Satz smiled evilly, making Raziel's face distort into anger. The High Archon knew that he was dealing with a creature whose strength was about the same level as his, and this was a situation he never expected to experience on a small island that was in the middle of nowhere. Kama-Satz glanced at the rank 9 sovereigns, who were right beside the High Archon, with a greedy look. Zion had promised him that if he agreed to help him, not only would the Death Bat gain a rank 9 sovereign as a subordinate, but he would also be able to accumulate some apocalypse points. This was an opportunity that Kama-Satz wouldn't dare to miss, for it benefited him in more ways than one. "Give that girl to us, or else," one of the rank 9 sovereigns demanded. "Oh, you want this girl?" Kama-Satz chuckled as he glanced at the beautiful teenage girl in his arms. "What can you give me in return?" "Your life," the rank 9 sovereign sneered. He wasn't worried about talking down on the creature who was more powerful than him, because he had the High Archon, Raziel, with him. "I'm so scared," Kama-Satz chuckled. "I guess you don't want her then?" After saying those words, Kama-Satz turned into a blur as he flew away at a speed that was 3 times faster than the speed of sound. He had created a barrier to protect Shasha from any side effects of his extreme speed, keeping her safe in his arms. Kama-Satz was so fast that, in the blink of an eye, he was already 1,000 meters away from where he was earlier. This caught Raziel and his subordinates off guard. Upon realization, they roared in anger and tried to pursue the fleeing Kama-Satz, who was flying in the opposite direction of the Gate of the Moonlight. Raziel, who was guarding Callie, was alarmed by Kama-Satz's astounding speed. In that brief moment, he understood that if Kama-Satz wanted to flee with the vessel of their moon princess, no one among them would be able to catch them. But, to his surprise and relief, Kama-Satz stopped at the edge of the second island and looked at Raziel with a smug look on his face. "I'll ask you one last time," Kama-Satz said with a devilish smirk. "What can you give me in return for this girl?" "You only have one chance, buddy, so make sure you say the words I want to hear." Raziel reined in his emotions, for this was the first time that a lowly creature dared to threaten him. But since this was an important occasion, he decided to yield for the sake of their mission's success. Raziel and his subordinates had also arrived at the scene, but none of them dared to make a move because the Death Bat had shown them that if he wished to leave, none of them had the power to stop him. "What do you want in exchange for that girl?" Raziel asked. "I want those 4 rank 9 sovereigns to become my subordinates," Kama-Satz replied. "This is the first time I've encountered your race, so I've decided to take a few of your people and make them my retainers." Raziel's subordinates all glared at the arrogant Death Bat, but none of them dared to voice their complaints. If this deal fell through, and the Death Bat escaped with the Moon Princess vessel, their king would personally smash their heads into pieces. Raziel and Raziel exchanged a glance with each other and nodded their heads at the same time. "Very well, we agree with this condition," Raziel stated. "But what is our insurance that you will not renege on our agreement?" "I am an upright and righteous Death Bat," Kama-Satz said with a smirk. "I have never lied in my life, and I am a very fair person. Since this is a proper trade, I will not renege on my promise. Of course, if you doubt me, there is nothing I can do about it. I'll just head home and make this girl my maid or something. So what will it be? Deal or no deal?" The Artemians understood that the one who held the power in this negotiation was none other than the Death Bat, but they didn't really care. Rank 9 sovereigns weren't easy to subjugate, and even if they pledged their loyalty to the Death Bat right now, they could always renege on the agreement later if they wished. "How do we make our exchange?" Raziel inquired. "Now you're talking." Kama-Satz laughed out loud because he hit the jackpot. "Since you guys can fly away anytime you want, I need to make sure that you won't run away. That's what we're going to fix first. I will create a portal, and those four will enter it without any complaint. Once they have all passed through the portal, I will give you this girl as promised." Raziel glanced at the lunar eclipse and knew that they couldn't afford to delay the ceremony. Because of this, he made a gesture for his subordinates to calmly enter the portal that the death bat had created. "Don't worry," Raziel said through telepathy. "I will come to find all of you. The four of you will become the pillars of our empire, so make sure to escape as soon as you confirm that the ceremony has ended." The four sovereigns nodded and walked toward the portal while glaring at Kamisats. They didn't know what lay on the other side of the portal, but they were confident that with four of them working together, no one would be able to stop them. Once the last sovereign had safely passed through the gate, the smile on Kamisats' face deepened before casually tossing Shasha to Raziel to complete the deal. "I don't know what you're going to do with that girl, but since you honored your part of the deal, I will also honor mine," Kamisats stated. "See, I am an upright and righteous death bat. I've never lied in my entire life." Raziel gave the death bat one last glance before flying toward the golden orb with Shasha. Shasha was awake, but she was still in a trance. The High Archon opened his hand, allowing the teenage girl to hover in front of him. Without a second thought, she reached out toward the golden orb, slowly passing through it. Raziel and Raziel both sighed in relief because they had succeeded in their mission. The golden orb was a divine artifact that could withstand any attack, no matter how strong it was. It would take over a dozen Magian princes and princesses to break it, and even then, it would take them half an hour to do so. Once done, the two High Archons nodded at each other before parting ways and heading to each of the pyramids. There they would conduct the ceremony, which would make Kali and Shasha merge into one entity. Kamisats watched this scene with amusement. If he wanted to escape, he would have already done it, and no one would be able to stop him. But this was such a good opportunity to gain 4 rank 9 sovereigns without too much effort on his part. The portal that he had created led directly to the treasury of the apocalypse, where Metatron was waiting. Camerasipa had led him to the artifact that allowed him to temporarily create a bridge that would take the Artemians to one of its saved locations, allowing him to trap them in a place where they wouldn't be able to escape no matter what. 100 apocalypse points received. Kamisats wanted to laugh out loud, but he refrained from doing so. His gaze then landed on the spot directly under the golden orb in the sky. He didn't know what Zion was planning, but no matter what it was, he wanted to be there and see for himself just how the 10-year-old would be able to turn this situation around. Alessia's face turned extremely pale when she saw her daughter trapped inside the golden orb alongside a girl named Kali. The two of them were facing each other, and both of them seemed to be in a trance. Suddenly, a beam of purple light and a beam of golden light emerged from the tips of the two pyramids, both aimed at the golden orb in the distance. The pyramids served as the bridge that allowed Kali to merge with her new vessel, without suffering from the backlash of forcefully taking over a body that didn't have the bloodline of the royal family of Chandria. At the same time, the blood of the Artemians, as well as the monsters that they had killed, rose up from the ground and also flew in the direction of the golden orb. The blood was so thick that it covered the golden orb entirely, blocking anyone from seeing anything from within. A moment later, the sound of 2 girls singing reverberated in the surroundings. It was a sad yet beautiful melody, signaling the beginning of the ritual that the Artemians wished to see. Within the golden orb, Shasha and Kali reached out to each other. The moment their hands touched, both of them performed a dance. It was the dance of the moonlight, making their bodies glow faintly as the powers they possessed mingled with each other. The king of Artem, who was seated on his throne, was able to see what was happening inside the golden orb. A faint smile hung on his face because he knew that when the day came to a close, he would have the power he needed to make the breakthrough to the celestial rank. This was the same rank as the 7 celestials and the 7 fiends of Solterra, making him one of those who would stand at the apex of the world. As the singing and dancing came to a close, Kali reached out to cup Shasha's face. The ceremony always ended with a kiss on the lips then. After that, the merger would begin. Shasha's body would become Kali's new vessel. Her body would transform to become the exact replica of the Moon Princess, never to be seen again. "I'm sorry," Callie said softly as she moved closer to Shasha. Tears streamed down the side of her face, because she knew that after she kissed the beautiful girl in front of her, Shasha would cease to exist. Callie was not in control of her body and was simply moving due to the power of the ritual. Shasha never responded to her words, still stuck in a trance. Her lips slightly parted as she waited for Callie to take her first and last kiss. "I'm sorry," Callie repeated when her lips were only a few inches from Shasha's own. "Forgive me." At that moment, words that she never thought she would hear reach her ears. "I forgive you." Two lips connected, and with it, the sound of a tolling bell reverberated in the surroundings. Raziel and Cultivation smiled victoriously. Ecstatic, they had accomplished their mission. All the Artemians began cheering and shouted, "Praise the king!" repeatedly. Alessia, Tyga, and Cain looked at the bloodied orb in the distance with pale expressions on their faces. Although they couldn't see anything, the reactions of the Artemians made them feel as if something very important to them had been taken away. Kamisats arched an eyebrow as he crossed his arms over his chest. He couldn't really see what was happening in the bloodied orb, but regardless of the result, he had already gained massively in this mission. Anything more would just be a bonus for him. After the bell tolled 13 times, it finally came to a stop. Colorful lights danced around the bloodied orb, signaling that the merger was about to finish. Suddenly, a cracking sound reverberated in the surroundings, making the seriously injured Uncle Boo and Albion tear up. Having witnessed the same scene multiple times, they already knew what it signified. The beholder wailed as he forced himself to fly toward the person he cared for. Blood trailed across the sky as he endured the pain from his injuries and the heartbreak, knowing that this would be the last time that he would see Callie again. Albion slowly propped himself up from the ground. If Raziel hadn't held back, he would have already died then and there. But the High Archon didn't kill Albion right away because of one reason. He wanted to see him despair as he watched the person he loved and cared for disappear right in front of his eyes. It was at this moment that the first batch of the Wanderers reached the gate of the moonlight. Some of them looked back to see what was happening, but since there was still a chance that the monsters would catch up to them, the majority of them chose to enter the gate. Herman, Rayon, Lambert, Phoebe, Rio, and Miriam stayed and looked in the distance, wanting to see everything until the very last moment. 13 had kept his promise that he would allow them to return to Pangea, and miraculously, aside from suffering some injuries, none of the Wanderers died. Amidst the cheering of the Artemians, Uncle Boo's pain-filled wails could still be heard, making the team leaders of the Wanderers understand the outcome of the battle. Does this mean that Shasha has? Rayon didn't have the strength to finish the rest of his words, because this was something that he didn't want to happen. Truth be told, he felt relieved when his sister, Rio, didn't become the Moon Princess candidate. But that didn't mean that he didn't feel pity for Shasha. He wished that it could have been some nameless wanderer who was chosen as the vessel of the Moon Princess. That way, even if they were to be sacrificed, the majority of them would be able to survive. Death was a normal thing among wanderers, especially for those who had been spirited away for the first time. They had already prepared themselves for the worst, so knowing that they would be able to survive this ordeal made them happy. Still, the result didn't sit well with them, making them wonder if there was something that they could have done to change the outcome. Suddenly, all sounds disappeared from the island as a ripple of power spread outward. Everyone's gaze landed on the colorful sphere in the sky, which was glowing brighter with each passing second. Then it happened. The orb shattered, allowing everyone to see the outcome of the ritual. Raziel's and Calaziel's eyes widened in shock as they stared at the figure hovering in the sky in disbelief. Kamisats, on the other hand, laughed out loud as he looked at the 10-year-old who was holding a young lady in his arms in a princess carry. 13's eyes glowed faintly in a greenish color as he looked down at the young lady, whose skin had started to wrinkle as her age slowly caught up to her. Albion appeared right beside them and tapped 13's shoulder, teleporting him to the ground safely. "Take care of her," 13 said as he passed Callie to the unicorn who had taken his demi-human form. She's very fragile, and she can die from the slightest impact, so take her somewhere far away from this place. What happened? Elyon asked as he held Callie tenderly, treating her as the most precious treasure. I'll tell you later, 13 replied. Go now. They're coming. We don't want her dying now, do we? Elyon no longer asked and teleported away from the battlefield. Raziel and Raziel roared in anger as they flew toward 13 with bloodshot eyes. Both of them were so confident that no one would be able to destroy the golden orb and infiltrate it under their watch. However, someone was able to do it, and now they didn't know if the ceremony had succeeded or not. 13, on the other hand, glanced in the direction of the death bat, who was looking down on him with an amused look on his face. Hello, a little help here, 13 said. I'm about to get pinched to death by 2 high archons. Aren't you going to help? Kamisats laughed before descending from the sky to scoop up the 10-year-old, who had successfully pissed off all the Artemians in the Arcadia archipelago. I think you pissed them off, Zion, Kamisats commented upon hearing both Raziel and Raziel roar in anger. They even left their respective pyramids and flew to the second island in order to turn the hateful human boy into meat paste. All part of the plan, 13 replied as he looked at the purple gate, which was now spawning hundreds of Artemians, who were all looking at the boy with bloodshot eyes. I'm very tempted to leave you here, just to see how they will torture you. Kamisats chuckled. But we can't have that now, can we? Especially since we've gone this far. Can you take on one of them? 13 inquired. I'll face that guy Raziel, Kamisats answered. He's the strongest here. You're just in the initial stages of a Magian Prince, and you want to fight a peak high archon. 13 stared at the death bat in disbelief. You sure about that? Do we have a choice? Kamisats asked back. No. See, the death bat glanced at the Artemians, who were all headed in his direction. If looks could kill, 13 and Kamisats would have already died 1,000 times over. But instead of running away, Kamisats stayed in place as if waiting for something. When their enemies were only dozens of meters away from them, the 10-year-old and the death bat heard a screech resounding in the heavens. A red phoenix suddenly descended from the sky, and behind her, countless flying monsters followed suit, raring and ready to fight the Artemians, who were all out for blood. The red phoenix spread her wings wide, and dozens of fireballs rained down on the army on the ground. Raziel and Raziel took the brunt of the barrage, preventing their people from dying en masse. But some weren't as lucky and got hit by the fireballs, making them scream in pain, desperation, and horror as their flesh instantly melted from the heat of the flames. The smell of burning flesh spread in the surroundings, triggering the Artemians into unleashing all their long-range attacks at the Red Phoenix, whose strength matched their high archons. While this was happening, the Purple Gate was spitting more Artemians to the battlefield, surpassing the 5,000 warriors quota they planned, which should have been enough to make the Arcadia archipelago their stronghold. The number continued to rise until it surpassed 10,000, a force enough to destroy a few human kingdoms. Kamisats, what do you see? 13 asked as he looked down on the army that seemed to increase by the second. A bunch of apocalypse points, Kamisats replied. I hope they send more, though. This won't be enough. The two of you seem to be having a lot of fun, the Red Phoenix commented as she transformed into the Magian Princess of Prophecy, Camersepa. By the way, Kamisats, are you not going to call your army? Camersepa had brought countless flying monsters, as well as aquatic monsters, who were all currently in the sea and only waiting for her order to attack. I was just about to do that. Don't rush me, Kamisats replied before whistling long and hard. Soon, the sound of flapping wings reached everyone's ears. Manticores, cockatrices, and wyverns, as well as countless bats, answered his call and swarmed toward the island. Drop me off, 13 said. I'll assist the two of you in any way I can. Kamisats knew that 13 would be useless in a fight of this magnitude. They had brought their armies in preparation for this day, but the deciding factor in order to win this battle was the fall of Raziel and Raziel, who were the highest commanding officers of the Artemian army. The death bat flew toward the gate of the moonlight, covering the distance in just a few seconds. He then placed 13 beside the gate before flying back toward the battlefield, which had started to become a bloodbath. "Why are all of you still here?" 13 asked Rayon and the others, who were standing in front of the gate of the moonlight and watching the battle from afar. "Hurry up and go. You might get caught up in this battle or get hit by a random attack. Staying here will only endanger your lives. Your mission is over, so go and leave while you still can." After saying those words, the ground under the 10-year-old's feet gave way, making 13 fall into Rocky's wide-open mouth. The Artemians were targeting him, so he couldn't show himself out in the open. The only way to escape their detection was to dive deep underground. Unlike what happened to Rocky in the past, the Artemians had no methods of firing a laser beam that could reach him deep underground. The Moonwalkers was a race who had strong physical strength, and their forte was close combat. While they did have some ranged attacks, they still had a limitation which 13 Commissats and Camerasipa were exploiting right now. The only subordinates they brought to this battle were those who could either fly or unleash a barrage from a long distance away. Only Commissats and Camerasipa would fight in close combat. The rest of their subordinates would only use ranged attacks to whittle down the enemy forces. 13 had devised this strategy, understanding that there was nothing more irritating than an enemy who could hit you but couldn't be hit back. This was also the logic he had in mind when he chose the cheap shot savant as one of his core martial skills. "Are you ready to die, Artemian?" Commissats roared, his image turning into a blur as he flew 3 times faster than the speed of sound. Camerasipa, on the other hand, transformed into her phoenix form once again and started to engage Raziel in battle. She deliberately used wide-range attacks, knowing that even if her opponent was able to dodge it, his subordinates would not be as lucky as him. Also, there was another factor that was limiting the Artemians from being able to fight with their full strength. It was the atmosphere and gravity of Solterra. The gravity of Solterra was higher than their home planet, Artem. Because of this, they needed to exert more effort into moving their bodies properly. It wasn't easy to adjust to a new gravity in just a short time, so they were still having trouble adjusting to their current condition. The only ones who had been able to adjust without any problems were rank 7 monsters and above. On the contrary, those with lower rank felt as if their bodies were as heavy as lead, reducing their effectiveness in battle. While the Artemians were having a hard time defending against the attacks of their enemies, a swarm of bats flew in their direction. These bats then merged into one and formed a vampire lord. He was Commissat's right-hand man, Damien, and the only rank 9 sovereign in his army. "Such a waste of blood," Damien commented as he lifted his hand, turning the blood into a whip which he lashed out at the Artemians, slicing their bodies in half. High above the clouds, a giant rock made a nosedive toward the ground. When it was only a few dozen meters away from the Artemians, it flapped its wings, creating a sonic boom as it flew past the enemy formation, shredding them with a sonic blast. All the rank 9 sovereigns whom the Artemians had brought had been sent to the treasury of the apocalypse earlier. So the only rank 9 monster left within the Artemian army was the commander, Raziel, who was currently fighting against the Levinas family. Because of the absence of high-ranking monsters that could match them, Damien and the 3 rank 9 sovereigns that belonged to Camerasipa's army started a massacre. This made the other Artemians, who arrived to reinforce their people, regret their decision to come to Solterra. They could only watch helplessly as the vampire lord, Rock, Harpy Empress, and the giant turtle, who was shooting high pressure water cannons that could slice through armor, annihilated those who were unlucky enough to face them in battle. Although Raziel and Raziel wanted to help their people, they deemed that it would be more dangerous to let the Magian Prince and the Magian Princess attack them from behind. Because of this, both decided to kill their opponents as fast as possible. That way, they could save as much of their people as possible from the rank 9 monsters, who were taking advantage of their absence. It was just like Commissats said earlier. In their eyes, the Artemian army were all just apocalypse points. Points that they were going to farm until they ran out. 13, who was inside Rocky's mobile fortress, was looking at the battlefield through Black's eyes. The nightmare Black Hound was watching the battle from the top of a hill. Through this point of view, 13 was able to pinpoint the weakest link in the Artemian army, which he planned to take advantage of. Camersepa, who was fighting against Raziel, smiled as she looked at her opponent. "Someone wanted me to pass you a message," Camersepa stated. "For the past decades, you Artemians have killed countless wanderers for your entertainment. Now, it's time for all of you to pay your debts. None of you will leave this place alive." Raziel snorted as he summoned his sword to fight against the smiling lady in front of him. "Is that the message from that lowly human boy who ruined our preparations?" Raziel asked. "Yes," Camersepa replied. "A lowly human boy who said that he will piss on your head once it has been severed from your body." "Very funny," Raziel commented. "I guess I'll cut your head off first before I go look for him. The one who won't be leaving this place alive is you." Camersepa didn't say anything and simply kept the smile on her face. She was really not suited for fighting, since her specialty was commanding her forces from the rear. Even so, she still chose to face off against Raziel. She believed in her gut instinct, and it was telling her that if she left this high archon alone, the balance of power would once again shift in the invader's favor. This was something that 13, Kamisats, and Camersepa didn't want to happen. While the mage and princess and the high archon were about to start their battle, a loud explosion erupted in the distance, and Arthur skidded over a dozen meters from where he stood. The old man's face was solemn, but his eyes didn't show any signs of fear. Arthur had long wanted to become a monarch, so even if he had to risk his life, he must defeat the foe in front of him. "That's one tough shield you have there," Raziel stated, "but it will not be enough to save your life." Arthur didn't reply. After all, he didn't come to the Arcadia archipelago to chat. He only came to kill the foe in front of him and absorb the Artemian's core, allowing him to make his breakthrough. The two gazed at each other for a few seconds before Arthur took a step forward, creating a crater under his foot. He then disappeared from where he stood and reappeared right in front of Raziel, ready to strike. "Fool!" Raziel sneered as he also slashed forward. He planned to destroy his opponent's weapon with his strike, and then slice his opponent in half. He didn't believe that a throne would be strong enough to defeat him in battle. But, just as the two swords were about to make contact, dozens of spears emerged from the ground around Raziel's body and stabbed him from every direction. This made the rank 9 commander pause for a brief second, making him lose the momentum of his strike. The sound of two metals clashing against each other spread in the surroundings. Raziel was forced to take a single step back due to the force behind Arthur's strike. But a second later, he felt a stinging pain behind his right knee, making him look down behind him. There, he saw a lady with long black hair, holding two short swords in each hand. Before the rank 9 commander could do anything, the black-haired lady swiftly retreated and distanced herself from the enemy whom she had stabbed. The rank 9 commander was 4 meters tall, so the only part Callista could hit was the back of Raziel's knee. Still, the most she was able to do to Raziel's skin was to draw a little bit of his blood. However, that was enough for Callista. Raziel narrowed his eyes on the lady who attacked him from behind before raising his hand to block a boulder that was sent flying in his direction. Hans loosened his tie as he also prepared to go all out against the rank 9 commander. "I thought you planned to fight me one-on-one," Raziel asked as he looked at Arthur in disdain. "I don't remember saying such a thing," Arthur replied. "The only thing I said is that it is high time that I become a monarch. I never said anything about fighting you one-on-one." Raziel didn't say anything and simply did a backhand slash with his sword, targeting Callista, who had managed to sneak an attack at him earlier. The black-haired lady nimbly jumped and rolled to her right side, evading Raziel's attack that was meant to take her life. Arthur once again charged in Raziel's direction. Canceling his shield, he held his great sword with both hands. Raziel, who was holding his own sword with one hand, initially decided to block Arthur's blow and make sure that the other insects facing him wouldn't be able to land a sneak attack on his body. Although faint, the stinging behind his right knee was becoming more pronounced, making him feel that the injury he received wasn't that simple. But his decision would soon prove to be a mistake. Arthur was planning to use the strongest attack of his Heaven's Blade martial skill, which was a divine ranked martial technique that he acquired by wielding the two mythical weapons that Gerald and Zion had crafted especially for him. Heaven's Wrath. Arthur roared as the great sword in his hand glowed in a golden light. Just as he was about to seriously block Arthur's blow, the ground under his feet shifted, making him lose his balance. Arthur's slash created a deep and massive fissure on the ground that extended to hundreds of meters. When the light receded, a severed arm fell on the ground, followed by a pained scream from Raziel, who had just had his dominant arm cut off from his body. 13, who had orchestrated Rocky's attack, sneered as Rocky briefly emerged from the ground in order to swallow the severed arm before diving into the ground once more. Rocky's attack was flawless. His master had timed it perfectly, leaving no room for errors. Since 13 was worried about the Levinas family, he decided to assist them first in battle so that Arthur would get an upper hand against his enemy. However, he also knew that even with one of his arms severed, a rank 9 sovereign would not be going down easily. This was also the reason why he asked Rocky to dive deeper, intending to ensure that they were out of Raziel's detection range. From beneath the ground, they would continue planning their next sneak attack that would deal a fatal blow to the commander of the Artemian army. Raziel didn't expect that Arthur's attack would chop off his right arm. It was all because of that sneak attack from under his feet that he hadn't seen coming. Not only was his arm cut off, but his weapon, which was also of the mythical rank, had dropped to the ground with it. Unfortunately for him, 13 didn't give him the opportunity to recover his arm or his weapon, swiftly pulling them all into Rocky's mobile fortress. After realizing that his opponent was capable of killing him, Raziel was forced to make an important choice: stay and fight, or flee to live another day. Although it would take a long period of time, he was confident that his arm could be regrown using the technology that his people possessed. The weapon he lost could also be replaced, so making the decision was easier for him. Without even saying a word, Raziel opened his wings to fly away. But before he could take off from the ground, Cranky emerged behind him and grabbed one of his wings, ripping it apart. The devil-horned honey badger had developed an insane stealth ability that prevented anyone from detecting it as long as it was in the ground. As a rank 8 mutant sovereign, his strength was also stronger than most rank 8 sovereigns, allowing Cranky to deal serious injuries to rank 9 monsters and below that were unlucky enough to be sneak attacked by him. 13 had called out to the devil-horned honey badger when he and Rocky were headed in the Leventis family's direction in order to assist them in battle. Cranky, who had also fought alongside the boy during the battle against Arundel, didn't hesitate and accepted his request for help. After Raziel had his wings torn off from his body, escaping through the sky was no longer an option. The Artemian grunted in pain before launching a backhand attack at the devil-horned honey badger. But Cranky already expected this to happen, so after tearing off one of Raziel's wings, he didn't hesitate to dig underground to escape the commander's counterattack. Although Arthur didn't expect that he would receive additional help from a monster, he didn't miss the opportunity given to him and took the initiative to attack. Knowing that his life was truly on the line, the commander of the Artemian army did the only thing that he could do, and that was to run away. He wasn't a fool. Raziel understood that he didn't stand a chance at winning when there were 2 bastards sneak attacking him from the ground. Also, Arthur's sword was extremely deadly, and he had already experienced it firsthand. But he was only able to take 5 steps when the ground in front of him collapsed. Cranky created a trap for the Artemian earlier and hit at the bottom of the sinkhole he created. But Raziel was already expecting something like this to happen. The moment he felt that the ground under his feet was about to give way, he jumped as high as he could. Cranky watched as his prey jumped over the hole he created, making him screech. However, before the Artemian commander could rejoice, the ground where he was about to land opened up, making him roar in anger. "Do you really think I'd let you escape?" 13 sneered. Just now, he calculated the exact place where Raziel was going to land and asked Rocky to create a sinkhole in that location. Unable to fly and correct his landing, Raziel fell into the 3-meter deep hole, with only his shoulders and head jutting out of the ground. Michael pierced the ground in front of him with his spear, allowing him to create countless spears to attack the fallen commander, trapping him in place. The tip of Rocky's tail coiled around one of Arameel's feet, preventing him from freeing himself from the hole. With only one hand to support his body, the Artemian commander wasn't able to exert enough force to pull himself out of 13's trap. A few seconds later, Cranky grabbed hold of Arameel's remaining arm and pulled it deeper into the ground, sealing his fate. Arameel could only watch in horror as Arthur's sword was about to slash his neck. He was unresigned and in disbelief. Who knew that someone as powerful as him would die in the hands of the lowly creatures whom he despised so much? Arthur poured all of his strength in his sword swing, his eyes filled with determination. Now that the path to being monarch was in front of him, he would not let it escape no matter what. "Stop!" Arameel shouted as his last attempt to preserve his life. But Arthur showed no mercy and went for the kill. Arameel saw his world spin around him before coming to a complete stop. Then he saw a body without a head, with blood spurting up on the severed neck like a fountain, dyeing its surroundings with blood. As the light in his eyes slowly dimmed, Arameel remembered something from 10 years ago. The Moon Princess candidate, whom he had personally captured to sacrifice to Callie, told him something that made him snort back then. "A wanderer will avenge me, and when that time comes, you will die a dog's death." The Artemian commander treated the teenage girl's last words as the ramblings of a weakling who didn't have the power to resist her fate. But as his last vestige of life was about to escape him, a young boy appeared in front of him and looked down on him in disdain. "I have come to avenge the wanderers whom you thought were weaklings," 13 stated. "You will not be the first nor the last Artemian to die on this island. The island soaked with the blood of the thousands of children that you and your people killed. You can go to hell knowing that you will not go there alone. I'll make sure that your people will accompany you there as well." 13 didn't stop there and even spat on Arameel's face because of the rage he felt after absorbing all of Callie's memories. He saw the last moments of the candidates of the Moon Princess, as well as the dying screams of countless wanderers whom the Artemian commander had killed just for fun. "I'll see you in hell." Arameel used the last bit of his life force to say those words to 13 before the light on his eyes disappeared completely. Even in death, his eyes were open and looking at the boy who had trampled on his honor and dignity. "You'll see me in hell?" The corner of 13's lips curled up, as if he heard the biggest joke of his life. The boy then crouched down and whispered something in the dead Artemian's ear. "Systems don't go to hell," 13 said coldly. "You can wait there for eternity, for all I care. Tiona, go and eat this clown." The black snake nodded and slithered through the Artemian's ear and activated her predation ability. At that moment, he heard Cranky screech, which made the boy look behind him. There, the devil-horned honey badger screeched at Arthur, who had beaten him in getting the core of the Artemian commander. 13 didn't know whether he should laugh or cry. Cranky was really a bona fide glutton who wouldn't hesitate to attack even his allies if they took his food. Out of anger, Cranky tried to smack Arthur away, but the old man summoned his shield and tanked Cranky's attack. Before things escalated any further, 13 stood in between the two to stop them from fighting. "Cranky, there are still many cores here to be eaten," 13 stated. "The more you waste your time here, the fewer cores you'll get." Cranky glanced at the Artemians, who were dying by the dozens with each passing second. Kamisat's and Camerasipa's commanders were doing a one-sided massacre, mass killing their enemies like they were trash mobs. The barbarians, tigerkins, ogres, and trolls were also busy killing and collecting the cores of the monsters whom they had killed. Cranky no longer hesitated and dug underground in order to get his share of the buffet, consisting of Artemians, who couldn't muster any resistance against their opponents. To make matters worse for the Artemians, the order of Raziel, who escaped earlier, returned after realizing that the monsters that came out of nowhere were on their side. They were the epitome of opportunistic bastards, and they fought tooth and nail to make sure that they would gain a profit from this expedition. Meanwhile, in the distance, a loud booming sound was heard as Kamisat's body crashed into the ground, forming a crater. Raziel, who was the strongest High Archon on the island, stood like an invincible pillar that no one could break. Kamisatz wiped the blood from the corner of his lips and propped himself up from the ground. I think I'm biting off more than I can chew right now. Kamisatz narrowed his eyes because none of his attacks worked on his opponent. He was confident in his speed, and he had decent strength, which made him believe that he could overcome the difference in ranks. However, his opponent was no ordinary opponent. Raziel was covered from head to toe with legendary ranked equipment, which was made by the best blacksmiths of Artem. "Is that all that you got, you puny little bat?" Raziel asked in disdain. "You were spouting a bunch of nonsense about defeating me a while ago, but you can't even land a blow on my body." "Shut up, you cheater," Kamisatz replied. "Take off that armor if you dare. Let's see if this puny little bat can't hurt you." Raziel snorted before launching 2 rotating discs at the death bat, who didn't hesitate to fly away to avoid the spinning discs that could easily cut off his body parts if he wasn't careful. Kamisatz was tempted to ask his allies for help, but since he didn't want them to look down at him, he gritted his teeth and unleashed a supersonic attack at his opponent. The ground under Raziel's feet shattered, but he remained unscathed. Even sound wave attacks don't work on his armor, Kamisatz thought. What a cheater. Raziel was the second strongest being in Artem, next only to his king. His fighting prowess, which had been refined through countless battles against the people of Chandria, was the real deal. But it doesn't change the fact that the main reason why he could move unhindered on the battlefield was all thanks to his legendary ranked armor, which many believe to be pseudo-divine equipment. Any attacks that were aimed at Raziel would bounce off on the armor, negating their effects. Using his extreme speed, Kamisatz had tried to attack Raziel in his blind spots, but even when his attacks landed, the armor his opponent was equipped with repelled his blows. It was as if Kamisatz was trying to punch the hardest diamond and was only getting hurt in the process. Because of this, he tried to use other attacks in his arsenal, but none of them worked against Raziel. Even his sonic attacks, which could cause serious internal injuries to his opponents while wearing their armor, were negated by the ability of the High Archon's defensive equipment. "Feel free to run away, weakling," Raziel taunted the deathbat as he walked in Kamisatz's direction. "I admit that I cannot catch you because you are extremely fast, but that's your only merit. You're just fast." Raziel then scanned the battlefield and saw Camersepa's battle against his comrade, Cultivation. Currently, Cultivation had the upper hand and seemed to be overpowering the Magian princess during their exchanges. Camersepa was an all-rounder. She had average strength, defense, speed, and fighting abilities. The Magian princess didn't excel at anything, which was why she was currently being pushed back every time she exchanged a blow with her opponent. Seeing this, Raziel decided to assist Cultivation in dealing with his opponent, so that both of them could work together to reverse their army's current situation. Opening his wings, the High Archon flew toward Camersepa from her blind spot. Since the Magian princess was busy fighting against Cultivation, she didn't have time to spare for Raziel, who was planning to go for the kill. "I won't let you." Kamisatz roared as he dove down from the sky and attacked Raziel repeatedly. However, the invisible barrier that emanated from the High Archon's body repelled his attacks easily. Raziel didn't even bother to look in his direction because his gaze had locked on the Magian princess. Kamisatz knew that if Camersepa was killed, it would be entirely his fault. Although he didn't care about her much in the past, she was now part of the Trinity of the Apocalypse, which he had founded. Also, the artifact that allowed the Deathbat to form a portal that led to the treasury of the Apocalypse belonged to Camersepa. She had lent it to Kamisatz so that the latter could gain some rank 9 subordinates, which he was seriously lacking. Camersepa decided to invest in the Deathbat because the stronger Kamisatz became, the better it would be for their alliance. He had crawled his way to reach his current rank, so he never thought that he would need the help of others. But despite his arrogance, Kamisatz understood that there were some things that he couldn't do on his own. This was why he decided to cease all hostilities towards 13 and, instead, formed an alliance with him. The original plan was for only the 2 of them to form a team, but for some reason, Camersepa wanted to join as well. Since having her was a great boost in their strength and flexibility. Kamisats agreed and discussed many forms of cooperation with the Magian princess, who had unlocked the most treasures in the treasury of the apocalypse. Camerasipa, behind you! Kamisats roared as he continued to attack Raziel from any direction, not caring that his fists had already turned bloody from his repeated attacks. The Magian princess glanced behind her back and hastily covered her body in what seemed like full crimson plate armor. Raziel's speed suddenly increased as he and Raziel exchanged glances with each other. The two of them were going to pincer attack the Magian princess so that one of their opponents would be eliminated faster. Just when the two of them thought that their target would be unable to escape no matter what, a high-pressure water cannon slammed on Raziel's body and pushed him away from the Magian princess. Camerasipa then crossed both of her arms over her chest and activated her armor's ability, which had the power to create a crimson dome to protect her from any attacks. Raziel clicked his tongue because Raziel was unable to push through with their synchronized attack, but he decided to go through with it and punched forward, breaking Camerasipa's defensive dome, which sent her flying thousands of meters away, only stopping when her body smashed into the mountain in the distance. Kamisats anxiously looked in his comrade's direction. He was only able to sigh in relief after Camerasipa emerged from the hole in the mountain, looking unscathed. Truth be told, Camerasipa didn't have any blind spots. Everything that happened was just part of her act. She allowed Raziel to send her flying because she deemed that this was the optimal way to overcome the difference in power. Also, she was able to get a brief glance at the future, allowing her to see an opportunity to overcome Raziel's cheat-like armor, which couldn't be bypassed using normal means. Camerasipa didn't mind if they failed to defeat the two high archons in this battle. She and 13 both agreed that as long as the lower-ranking Artemians were all killed, this mission was a success. All they wanted to do was make sure the Artemian army would suffer as many losses as possible so that the number of apocalypse points they had would increase by leaps and bounds. But Kamisats was different. He hated losing. He was a loser in the past, so he always strived to not feel the same feeling of helplessness again. There's a small chance that you will be able to overcome this hurdle, Kamisats, Camerasipa mused. And once you do, you will become stronger than ever before. Before the battle started, Camerasipa had done a divination session. She had seen that in this battle, 13 and Kamisats would grow more powerful, but there were several risks involved. The Magian princess liked to take calculated risks, and this was one of them. As to whether her two allies would be able to grow in this battle, it all depended on their conviction. Meanwhile, in the royal palace of Artem, the Artemian king crushed the wine cup in his hand out of anger after seeing the outcome of the ceremony. Seething in anger, he left the throne room and headed toward the portal that would lead him to the Purple Gate in the Arcadian archipelago. He had spent decades trying to gain the power he wished to possess. Yet at the very last minute, a lowly human boy flipped the table and destroyed all the preparations he had made. "I won't forgive you," the Artemian king growled. "I will kill you." The royal guards protecting the king followed behind him. Although they were only rank 8 sovereigns, they numbered over 20, making them an elite force that could change the outcome of the battle if they were to go to Solterra. Their king was also a pseudo-celestial, having incredible powers at his disposal. Although the Purple Gate would be strained to its limit, sending the Artemian king and his cohort to Solterra, it was not impossible. However, when they were only dozens of meters away from the Purple Gate, a golden streak of light descended from the sky, creating a trail of fiery blaze in its wake. It shot towards the Purple Gate like a railgun, making the Artemian king's face contort in anger. "No!" the king roared, but it was already too late. A loud explosion erupted, and gusts of powerful wind expanded outwards. When the blinding light receded, the Artemian king's gaze landed on a wooden staff that destroyed his only pathway to the Arcadian archipelago. "Gramps, I know that you're excited to become a monarch, but don't consume that core now," 13 said. "Wait for me to return to Solterra. If you do, I promise that you will be even stronger than a monarch in the central government." How long must I wait? Ather frowned. Clearly, he didn't want to wait for long. Becoming a monarch was the main goal that he had set in his lifetime, and he was only one step away from achieving it. However, he didn't dare to casually brush off his no-good grandson's words, especially after everything that he had witnessed during this battle. Wait until I return, 13 answered. I promise that it will not take me more than a week to return to Pangea. Of course, if you don't want to wait, then you can just absorb that and get it over with. But I assure you that you will regret doing it. Don't say I didn't warn you. Lady Callista rested her head on her husband's shoulder and nodded her head. Trust Zion, Lady Callista stated. He only wants the best for the family. Also, you're just going to wait for a week at most. It's not like you need to wait for a year, you know? Arthur reluctantly nodded his head before storing the core inside his storage ring. What do we do now, Zion? Michael asked after fixing his glasses. Should we just continue to kill these monsters and harvest their monster parts? Yes and no, 13 replied. I want Gramps to stay with Mother and Shasha to protect them just in case rank 7 sovereigns and above targets them. The rest can continue to farm cores and monster parts. But stay away from the High Archons. We don't want any accidents to happen, right? The members of the Levinas family nodded in understanding and divided themselves into 2 teams. Arthur went to where Alessia and Shasha were hiding with Tyga, Cain, and Adira. Now that the battlefield had descended into complete pandemonium, there was a chance that they would be targeted by the Artemians if they were seen by them. 13 knew that as long as the High Archons were defeated, the rest of the Artemian army would no longer stand a chance against the combined might of the allies he had asked to help him fight this war. On the contrary, if Kamisats and Camersipa were to be defeated, the situation would be the opposite. The ones who would be one-sidedly slaughtered would be the boy and his allies. Just as 13 was thinking along these lines, a loud explosion reached his ears, making him look in the north. His connection with Blackie, who was observing the battle from a good vantage point, allowed him to see the sorry state of the death bat, whose body was covered in wounds. *T. That armor is really a cheat, Kamisats ranted as he forced himself to stand up. How can I possibly land a blow on his body while he's wearing that? He already unleashed everything he had in his arsenal, but none of them worked. With every exchange, the only one receiving damage was him. There was even a time when Raziel managed to land a solid blow on his chest, which made him feel as if he was dying. The death bat then glanced in the distance and saw that Camersipa and her opponent, Raziel, were in a stalemate. Seeing that both of them were unable to gain advantage over the other, Kamisats realized that he wouldn't be getting any reinforcements anytime soon. His right-hand man, Damien, offered to help him, but Kamisats rejected his proposal and ordered him to continue decimating the Artemian army. He knew that even with the Vampire Lord's help, the situation wouldn't change. In fact, it might further deteriorate. Kamisats was confident that he would be able to dodge any attack that Raziel threw at him. But the same couldn't be said for Damien. The Vampire Lord was only a rank 9 sovereign, and a single blow from Raziel was enough to threaten his life. With this thought in mind, Kamisats didn't dare send his only rank 9 subordinate to face an opponent whom even he, a Magian prince, was having a hard time fighting. What's wrong? Raziel sneered. Did you run out of steam? No, Kamisats replied. I'm just having fun watching your people die. I even saw that commander of yours kick the bucket a minute ago. Raziel frowned before glancing in the direction where Arameal was fighting earlier. When he saw the commander's headless body, the High Archon's face contorted in anger. I'll kill you, Raziel roared before lunging at Kamisats, who deftly attacked with his superior speed. webnovel.co. You don't need to do that, Kamisats replied. I die every time I try to smack your face. How about you take off that armor of yours and fight me fair and square? The only answer that the Deathbat received was a blazing slash, which he dodged quite easily. The slash traveled in a straight line, annihilating the allies and foes who were in its path. Raziel's single blow created a 2-mile-long fissure that was dozens of meters deep, making Kamisats whistle. You Artemians sure are strong physically, but it's useless if you can't hit your targets, Kamisats taunted. Can't you do something bet? The death bat wasn't able to finish what he was about to say because he suddenly felt dizzy, making him stagger from where he was standing. He wasn't aware that Raziel's attack earlier was only a smokescreen to hide his original plan. Just like Kamisat's, the High Archon had an ability that emitted high-frequency waves, but it would only work when fused with a powerful sword strike. The force behind Raziel's attack also carried the supersonic waves, which was something that Kamisat's wasn't prepared for. The Magian Prince's ears were very sensitive. Any high-frequency attacks were deadly to him, for they caused him to momentarily lose his sense of balance and mental clarity. That moment of weakness was exploited by Raziel, and he punched Kamisat's in the stomach, making the latter bend his body like a shrimp. The sword in the High Archon's hand had disappeared. Raziel used his fist to unleash a flurry of blows, which the death bat was unable to dodge in his current state. Each punch sent a shock wave through the surroundings, dealing serious injuries to the Magian Prince who relied on his speed to dodge any attack that was aimed in his direction. Seeing that her ally was being one-sidedly pummeled by the High Archon, Camerasipa decided to save Kamisat's. But Raziel blocked her path and, with his deadly sword strikes, forced the Magian Princess to go on the defensive. A cracking sound resounded in the surroundings as Raziel stomped on Kamisat's knee, breaking the death bat's bones. The High Archon then grabbed his opponent's neck and raised him high in the air with one hand. "Any last words?" Raziel asked in an arrogant tone. But after seeing that his opponent had already lost consciousness, he raised his free hand and prepared to take the life of the death bat, who never stood a chance against him in the first place. "Kamisat's, good job killing that monster. Now, give me that core in your hand before I hit you." It had always been like that. Bottom feeders like you should know their place. Do you think that this world has a place for the weak? I agree. This world was a place where the strong ruled, and where the weak had no choice but to either bow their heads in submission or roll over to the side and die. What's the point in trying hard when you know that you'll still fail in the end? Because no one knows if that ending was final. If there was a small chance that a different ending could be seen at the end of this suffering, then wouldn't all the sacrifices I made be worth it? Kamisat's, run. The beautiful lady with long red hair said weakly, "He's coming, and he's coming for the both of us." "Then let him come," I said coldly. "If we're going to die anyway, then we might die together." "No, you will not die here. You will escape. You will become strong, and then you will avenge me. I won't leave you. I'd rather follow you to the afterlife than spend eternity alone." "Silly Kamisat's," the beautiful lady smiled bitterly. "You know that I won't really die, right? I'll just disappear for a century or two before I pop out again like a mushroom. You, on the other hand, will not be so lucky. So run. Run not only for your sake, but for my sake as well." It had been many years since I last saw her. Had it already been a century? I couldn't recall. Everything was a blur, but after that fateful day, I did one thing and one thing only. I did what I had to do to become strong. From a rank 2 monster, I slowly rose through the ranks, using every dirty trick that I could think of to overpower monsters who were stronger than me. Day after day, night after night. It didn't matter if I felt pain, hunger, fear, or anxiety. My goal was to only live long enough to be able to see her again. At least, that was what I believed back then. However, the anger that I had bottled up was growing stronger with each passing day. Unfortunately, the one whom I wanted to kill the most was a Magian Prince. I was just a rank 3 monster. Although I feared death, there was one thing that I feared more. That one thing was the thought that I wouldn't see her again. Every time she revived, the Magian Prince, who gained the title the Devourer, would come at her again and eat her just to make her regret her decision of going against his orders. It was an impossible task, suicidal even. But even so, I dedicated my life to reaching that one goal of killing Elyon, the Devourer. It didn't matter even if I died in the process. As long as I gained the power to beat him, I would not hesitate to sell my soul to whoever would grant me my wish. "I like your eyes. Tell me, is there someone you would like to kill?" A voice that came out of nowhere whispered in my ears. "Yes," I answered back then without any hesitation. "Then, would you like to have the power to kill that person?" a being who stood at the apex of the world, asked while sipping a cup of tea in the middle of nowhere as if it was the most normal thing in the world. I do. Once more, I answered with determination. Then take it. The man who found me lying in the woods, covered with my own blood, said with amusement. He took a black vial from his pocket and poured its contents into my mouth. The chances of you dying is 90%, the man, who looked like an ordinary human, stated. So, whether you live, die, or gain the power you wish to have, it will all depend on your luck. So, tell me, do you feel lucky right now? That question, which I could still clearly remember even now, would often appear in my dreams. The potion was an experimental concoction made by one of the most elusive celestials in Solterra. He goes by the name Dantanian, the celestial who had many faces. No one knew what he or she really looked like. Even the other celestials and the seven fiends didn't know Dantanian's true identity. Perhaps even Dantanian himself had forgotten what he really looked like after the many faces he had worn and discarded on a whim. As the potion took effect on my body, my flesh tore apart, and my bones broke without warning. My body was being molded into something that I was not familiar with. It was pure torture. Muscles and blood vessels were torn up, while bones broke and reformed once again. This agonizing incident lasted for an entire day before a red bat emerged from a pool of blood. When I regained my senses, Dantanian was no longer there. If not for the fact that my surroundings were covered in blood, which I knew belonged to me, I would have thought that everything I had experienced was just a dream. But it wasn't a dream. On that day, a mutant monster was born, and I would soon be known as Kamisats the Untamed. With my new powers, I fought monsters who were 2 ranks higher than me. Days, weeks, months, years. They passed so swiftly like the changing of the seasons, and, after a long period of time, I found an opportunity to kill the person whom I wanted to kill. Eretun the Devourer had decided to wage war on another Magian prince, and they engaged in a very fierce battle. His opponent wasn't a pushover, and after nearly half a day of fighting, Eretun decided to escape after receiving a serious injury. After years of life and death battles, I managed to raise my rank to become a rank 8 sovereign. My opponent was 2 ranks higher than me, but he was seriously injured. I knew that if I didn't act then, my only chance to kill him would slip away. So, I laid out an ambush and went for the kill when I was certain that he wouldn't be able to evade my attack. Slip away. So, I laid out an ambush and went for the kill when I was certain at that time I could already travel at the speed of sound using short bursts. So, with everything in my arsenal, I took a leap of faith and took my enemy's life in a single decisive blow, aimed at his only weakness, his heart. I can still recall the taste of his heart as I devoured it back then. It was the most delicious thing I had tasted in my lifetime. But, to my surprise, Eretun the Devourer held another secret that I wasn't aware of. He was part of a secret organization called the Order of the Apocalypse, and after killing him, I became its newest member. I couldn't help but laugh after remembering that incident, so I did just that. I laughed. I laughed so hard that laughing made my sides hurt. But, as I was laughing my heart out, a voice filled with annoyance reached my ears. Kamisats, you bastard. This is no time for a flashback. Get a grip. A flashback? What is this person saying? What flashback? Have you become brain dead after getting your ass handed to you? If that's the case, you don't have to think of anything else. Just punch forward. Use your strongest punch. A punch? Sure, I could do that. Using all the strength that I could muster, I pulled back my arm and unleashed the strongest punch that had taken the life of Eretun, who had mercilessly killed the woman I loved. Vortex blow. Just like the voice said, I punched forward with everything I had. It was then that I felt that I hit something, and it felt good hitting it. Suddenly, the place where I punched cracked, and soon, the world around me shattered, making me remember where I was and what I was doing. The hateful Artemian, who was wearing cheat armor, loosened his grip on my neck after receiving my strongest attack. Smelling, sensing, and in a way, tasting the scent of the blood that had emerged from his mouth after my punch connected made my eyes widen in shock. I had tried every attack that I could think of, but none of them worked. But now, for some reason, my blow connected and it made my enemy bleed because of it. I didn't have a mirror, but I could feel that a devilish smile had appeared on my face. But before I could rejoice, the familiar voice once again reached my ears. "What are you waiting for? Continue punching, doofus." My eyes glanced briefly at the 10-year-old clinging to Raziel's leg like a monkey before I roared to unleash a flurry of blows on my opponent's face, leaving him no room to react. My punches, which were 3 times faster than the speed of sound, connected with the bastard's face, fueling up my confidence that I now had the ability to defeat him. "Die, you bastard!" I roared hatefully as my fists turned crimson, augmenting the strength of my punches to the next level. Aura, 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 aura. It didn't matter if my opponent was strong. It didn't matter if he had better equipment than me. I am Kamisatz the Untamed, and with my fists, I'll carve my path in the world. I will make those who look down on me suffer the same fate as this Artemian, who would come to regret that he didn't kill me sooner. Raziel thought that nothing could harm him in Solterra as long as he was wearing the legendary armor that had been crafted by the blacksmiths of Artem. This armor had taken more than a year to complete due to the complicated runes that were embedded in the crafting process. It made the High Archon impervious to almost all kinds of attacks from beings that were the same rank as him. This was why he didn't bother to dodge Kamisatz's punch, because he thought that it would only backfire on the deathbat. But he was wrong. Kamisatz's punch connected, which caught him completely off guard. Because of this, he wasn't able to react in time because it took him a while to digest what just happened. When he finally regained his composure, it was already too late. Kamisatz's punches rained on him without mercy. They were fast, accurate, deadly, and most of all, traveled at 3 times the speed of sound. Simply put, Raziel couldn't dodge, block, or deflect the attacks because they were simply too fast for him to do anything. Aura, 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 aura. Kamisatz didn't know why the punches he had unleashed earlier didn't work, while his current punches were dealing heavy damage to his opponent. But he knew that now was not the right time to think about why his punches were suddenly connecting. So, he focused all of his strength to punch Raziel's face to oblivion while he still could. The moment the Deathbat's punches connected, 13 jumped off from hugging the High Archon's calf, and allowed Rocky to take him as far away from the battlefield as he could, while they still had the time to escape. 13 had the power to neutralize the ability of any item that he touched because of his item ban. Even if he used a throwing weapon like a throwing knife, throwing axe, darts, needles, and arrows, any ability they possessed would not activate for a period of time. Once the item left 13's hands, its ability would remain deactivated until a full minute had passed. Only after a minute would the abilities of the items return, allowing them to function normally. A minute might be a short time, but for Kamisatz, who was the fastest on the island, would be able to deal a lot of damage to Raziel, who had lost the defensive ability of his armor. In the battle in 1 minute, Kamisatz, 13 said through telepathy, "If you don't, you'll be dead." All the members of the Order of Apocalypse could talk to each other via telepathy as long as they were within 1,000 meters of each other. This was the bonus effect of the Ring of the Apocalypse that 13 had obtained, which was proof that he was now an official member of the Secret Order. After hearing what the boy had to say, Kamisatz no longer hesitated and further increased the speed of his punches. The only thing he targeted was Raziel's face, and no matter what the High Archon did, Kamisatz's punches would always connect, stacking up the damage that he received earlier. He tried to counterattack numerous times, but his blows were easily dodged by the Deathbat, whose fists never stopped hitting his face. When Raziel covered his face, Kamisatz would appear behind him and smack the back of his head repeatedly, targeting the place that was just above the neck area. The High Archon roared in anger, with the intention of blasting the Deathbat away with his wide-area attack, but Kamisatz held firm and endured the blue flames that expanded from Raziel's body. This was a matter of life and death, so Kamisatz allowed himself to get injured as he continued his one-sided barrage, sending blood flying in every direction. Raziel, who noticed that his comrade had lost the advantage, decided to reinforce Raziel, but he was blocked by Camerasipa, who prevented him from advancing further. "What's the rush?" Camerasipa asked in a teasing tone. "Why don't you just wait? After my allies are done with your friend, you're going to be next." Raziel tried to use brute force in order to break free from Camerasipa, but the Magian princess wasn't a pushover. While she did not specialize in fighting, her equipment made up for her weaknesses. Each layer of the Treasury of the Apocalypse had a special item that would only be given as a bonus to the first one that unlocked that layer. Camerasipa was the first among the Order of the Apocalypse to unlock the first up to the 6th layer, allowing her to gain 6 items that allowed her to stand toe-to-toe with those who specialized in close combat. These items were the winged boots that doubled her speed, full body armor that tripled her defensive abilities, a bracelet that could transform into a shield, further increasing her defensive abilities, a small dagger that could pierce through any armor, dealing wounds that wouldn't heal unless Camerasipa lifted the curse that the dagger embedded in that being's body, a circlet that allowed her to see anything around her for up to 20 miles, which prevented her from having any blind spot. Last, but not the least, was a crystal ball that she used when performing her divinations. Since she was the only one who had received these items, Camerasipa kept it a secret from the others, and also asked Metatron to not say anything about the bonus rewards for unlocking the treasury. With these items in her possession, Camerasipa was able to keep Raziel at bay, making the latter feel anxious the more time passed by. When the 1-minute time limit was almost over, Rocky once again emerged behind Raziel and opened his mouth. This allowed 13 to tap Raziel's calf a second time before they once again made their escape. By this point, Raziel was already beaten and battered and was already on his last legs. "I cannot fall here," Raziel said through gritted teeth. "I cannot fall here. Shut your trap and clench your teeth." Camerasipa roared as his fist connected with the side of the High Archon's face, breaking his teeth in the process. The Deathbat's fists were already bleeding, but he didn't stop punching. Half a minute later, he appeared behind Raziel, grabbed his head, and sank his fangs on the High Archon's neck, drinking his blood. He drank deeply, and he drank fast because 13 urged him that after a minute had passed, Raziel's armor would regain its abilities. Already heavily injured by the Deathbat's attack, Raziel tried to resist by punching Camerasipa's head, but the latter refused to budge and kept his fangs embedded in his enemy's neck. Soon, Raziel lost the strength to even lift his arms because of the damage that had accumulated over time, including the massive loss of blood. His body became skinny, and his skin wrinkly as the Deathbat continued to feast on his blood. When the 1-minute mark ended, the ability of the armor didn't activate because it required Raziel's continuous supply of energy to flow into it. Since he thought that his armor no longer worked, the High Archon thought that resistance was already futile. He didn't expect that it would only take a single instant for the Deathbat situation to be reversed. Instead of killing Camerasipa, the one who was dying was none other than him. It made him regret playing around with his prey, instead of killing him as fast as he could. "Your blood tastes like SH*T, Camerasipa said as he used his arms to wrap around Raziel's wrinkled face. But, thank for the apocalypse points. Without even giving his opponent to say his last words, Camerasipa decisively twisted the High Archon's neck, breaking it. After severe blood loss, Raziel was already weakened to the point that he could no longer offer any resistance. His lifeless body then collapsed on the ground, making the Deathbat raise his hands high up in the air in a victory pose before roaring with all of his might. The Artemians then glanced in his direction and were horrified when they saw that one of their High Archons had been killed. Some of them began to retreat towards the Purple Gate in a desperate attempt to go home. But to their surprise, the gate could no longer be seen, making them panic. It had been there just a few seconds ago, but now it was nowhere to be found. Sensing that their opponents had lost their will to fight, the Order of Raziel focused their attention on enslaving as many Artemians as possible. They knew that there might not be another opportunity to gain a monster that didn't belong to their world. The business-minded individuals were already thinking of auctioning some of the captured Artemians, which they believed would get a high bid on the black market. After roaring with all of his might, Kamisatz remembered that he should loot Zazriel's body, especially the armor which had given him a hard time earlier. However, when his gaze landed on the dead Artemian, the latter was already naked. Kamisatz's jaw almost dropped when he saw the 10-year-old boy trying to take off one of the rings from Zazriel's finger. 13, you bastard! Kamisatz grabbed the hateful boy who had managed to store Zazriel's ring into his storage space before the deathbat picked him up like a kitten. Why did you take my spoils? Your spoils? 13 asked with a confused expression. What spoils? Did you forget? You got your ass handed to you earlier. If not for me, you would have been dead a long time ago, you know? Kamisatz wasn't able to refute the boy's words because it was true. However, he was still the one that dealt the killing blow to his enemy, so he believed that he should at least get the armor for his troubles. 13, my dear friend, my partner in crime, my buddy, don't do this to me, man. Kamisatz decided to take a step back and negotiate with the boy. Don't do me dirty, man. Don't do me dirty. We're best buds, right? The corner of 13's lips twitched because of the shameless way that the deathbat was using to butter him up. But this worked perfectly for him. A legendary ranked armor might be good, but he was unable to wield such an item at this point in time. Of course, he could also give the armor to his family or his grandparents to make them stronger. But he decided not to do that. Kamisatz proved to be a reliable ally, so he decided that he could loan the armor to him under Metatron's special contract. That way, he could borrow the armor if there was an emergency and let his grandfather, Arthur, equip it in battle. With this setup, not only would it make Kamisatz happy, it also opened up the possibility of future collaboration as well. After telling the deathbat that he would loan the armor to him later, the Magian Prince became happy because he believed that his negotiation skills managed to convince the boy to allow him to use the armor for himself. There are still Artemians left. 13 pointed at Raziel, who seemed to have already lost the will to fight. Deal with him first. Okay. Kamisatz didn't hesitate and tag-teamed with Camerasipa to bring the High Archon to his knees. But when the deathbat was about to deal the killing blow, Camerasipa stopped him and offered Raziel a choice. Become my subordinate, and I will allow you to live, Camerasipa declared. Otherwise, I will give you a dog's death. So what will you choose? Raziel, who didn't want to die, agreed to Camerasipa's request, making Kamisatz extremely jealous. He thought that he already managed to close the gap of power between him and Camerasipa after he acquired the rank 9 sovereigns, who were now being brainwashed by Metatron in the treasury of the Apocalypse. Now, the Magian Princess of Prophecy had acquired a High Archon, who was just as strong as her as a subordinate, which made the deathbat's liver itch in envy. Camerasipa then created the contract of the Apocalypse, which would bind Raziel to her service for eternity. Of course, Kamisatz and 13 asked the Magian Princess to add a few quotes in the contract, stating that Raziel was not allowed to attack 13 and Kamisatz, even if Camerasipa ordered him to. The Magian Princess found this development quite amusing, but she decided to accept her ally's proposal so that there wouldn't be any hard feelings between them. The Artemians, who now numbered less than 200, surrendered after Raziel was subjugated. 13 didn't bother to oversee how the other factions treated all of the Artemians who surrendered, because he had a more pressing issue to deal with. After asking Rocky to take him to Uncle Boo and Albion, the 10-year-old saw an extremely heartbreaking scene. The Beholder and a unicorn, who had both taken their human forms, wept bitterly as they held the wrinkled body of the dying Moon Princess. Callie was in Albion's embrace, while Uncle Boo held her hand, while bawling his eyes out. Both could tell that their beloved only had a few minutes left to live, and yet, despite the pain she was feeling, she held onto the two monsters' hands, who loved her very much with a smile on her face. "Thank you, Zion," Callie said softly. "Now, I do not have to hurt anyone any longer. I am finally free." Uncle Boo's wailing intensified, while Albion's tears fell like rain. The two of them were willing to give up their lives just to save Callie, and yet they still failed in the end. Looking at this sad scene, 13 crouched down and very lightly patted Callie's head, as if telling her that she did well. Callie, who thought that she was being praised, smiled sweetly, as a single tear slid down the side of her face. She could tell that death was about to claim her, because her vision was starting to dim. The Moon Princess could barely see the three beside her, because her vision was failing her. "Hold me a little tighter, boo, Albion," Callie said softly. "It's getting dark, and I'm feeling a bit scared." The two monsters did as she asked and hugged her gently, not wanting to crush her weak and frail body. While the victors were cheering because they had won the battle, there were two monsters who wept bitterly because the body of the girl they loved was starting to grow cold. 13 bit his lips and closed his eyes. "I invoke Article 13 of the contract," 13 declared. Suddenly, time came to a complete stop, followed by a long and deep sigh that came from behind the 10-year-old. 13, you shouldn't casually invoke the agreement, especially when there is nothing that needs to be discussed, Laplace Demon complained. "You already know the rules, right? We have an agreement, especially when there is nothing that needs to be discussed," Laplace Demon complained. "You already know the rules, right?" "Hey, Laplace Demon," 13 said to stop the demi-human rabbit from finishing whatever he was going to say. "Do you believe in happy endings?" "I don't," Laplace Demon replied in a heartbeat. "I don't believe in them either." 13 nodded in agreement. "But right now we can make a happy ending. So, can I ask you for a favor?" The right-hand man of the one pursed his lips. "And why should I do that?" Laplace Demon asked with his arms crossed over his chest. "Because you and the one are not truly omnipotent." 13 looked at the sad scene in front of him that was frozen in time. Uncle Boo and Albion were hugging Callie, whose face had already become extremely pale. He was certain that the moment Laplace Demon returned time to normal, the Moon Princess would die in less than a minute. "There are things that you cannot do because of certain restrictions placed upon the two of you," 13 added. "And in order to handle the things that you cannot do, you will need someone to do it for you. So how about it? Do me one favor, and I'll do you a favor as well. It doesn't matter what favor you ask of me, as long as it will not go past my bottom line. Even if it's not you, we can always choose other wanderers to do the things that we want to do," Laplace Demon countered. "I'm sure that they will be more than happy to do something for us." 13 crouched down to hold Callie's wrinkled hand, a hand that had done her best to fight against her fate, but still lost in the end. "Well, that may be true, but I doubt that you'll find someone more competent than me to do the job," 13 stated. "In the future, you will look back on this day and regret the fact that you didn't accept my offer when I asked it of you." Laplace Demon didn't answer right away because he knew that he couldn't rule out the fact that 13 was right. Just as he was pondering on what to do, a voice reached his ear. "Agree to his condition," the one said, "but warn him that this will be just a one-time thing." Laplace Demon nodded and passed his employer's message to 13. "Tell us what you have in mind," Laplace Demon stated. "We will at least listen to your proposal." 13 sighed internally because he now had a chance to save the pitiful girl, whose life was hanging in the balance. Now that the two omnipotent beings of Solterra were willing to listen to his request, he told them what he wanted to happen. After listening to his words, the Laplace Demon and the one looked at the 10-year-old as if he was mad. "So, will you grant me this favor?" 13 asked after he finished his explanation. The Laplace Demon sighed before waving his hand. A moment later, Shasha and Alessia appeared beside 13. The demi-human rabbit then snapped his fingers, unfreezing the two, and allowed them to move in a world where time had already stopped moving. The two of them would play a role in creating the happy ending that 13 wished to have for the three pitiful creatures who had suffered many decades due to the workings of fate. "Zion, what's going on?" Alessia asked her son while subtly eyeing the Laplace Demon anxiously. Frankly, no wanderer would like to meet the right-hand man of the one, for his appearance didn't always mean good news. Most of the time, meeting him meant tragedy. The usual reason why he'd summon wanderers into his space was to give them missions that they didn't have the option to refuse. These missions were extremely difficult, and most of the time, Those who were chosen would perish in their attempt to clear it. No one really knew what these missions were, but one thing was certain. Meeting the Laplace demon was something that most wanderers didn't want to experience in their lifetime. "Mother, Sha, please listen to me," 13 said. "I want to save this girl, and for that, I will need both of your help." As if waiting for that moment, the Laplace demon snapped his finger, and a dimensional gate appeared on 13's right side, showing a person on the other side of it. Zion. Gerald looked at his son from the other side of the gate in surprise. He was currently preparing to craft something in his workshop when the dimensional gate appeared, giving him a fright. But a moment later, his eyes widened in shock when he also saw Alessia and his daughter, Sha, standing beside his son, who was looking at him with a solemn expression. "Pops, I need your help," 13 stated. "Come here for a while." Gerald didn't even hesitate and quickly stepped forward to cross the dimensional gate, where his family was waiting for him. Once he crossed to the other side, his gaze hardened upon seeing Laplace demon, who was standing a few meters away from him with his arms crossed over his chest. "We don't have much time, so I'll explain everything in a nutshell." 13 then started to tell his family what he planned to do, making his parents and his sister look at him in disbelief. "So, are you willing to help me?" 13 asked. Alessia and Gerald glanced at each other before nodding their heads at the same time. "We're willing," the 10-year-old sighed internally because he managed to cross the biggest hurdle. If Alessia and Gerald refused, he would have to think of another way to put an end to this tragic story. "Please unfreeze time for Uncle Boo and Albion," 13 said softly. Laplace demon nodded, and the two monsters have been freed from the frozen time. As if nothing had changed, the two monsters still continued to cry, with Uncle Boo wailing as if his time didn't freeze in the first place. Seeing this, Alessia clenched her fists. Just with how they were crying, she could tell how much these two beings cared for the girl, whose wrinkled body looked like it belonged to an old woman about to breathe her last. Uncle Boo and Albion were so engrossed in their sadness that they weren't aware that the time of others had come to a stop. They simply wept bitterly and held Callie for as long as they could before her life escaped their grasp. "Uncle Boo, Albion, do you wish to save Callie?" 13 asked, making the two monsters look in his direction with tears still streaming from their eyes. "Yes, I'll do anything. Just please, save her," Uncle Boo replied. "No matter the price, I will give it to you," Albion stated. "Please, save Callie." "Very well. I will ask for both of your lives in order to save her," 13 declared. "Are you willing? Will taking my life really save her?" Uncle Boo asked. "If yes, then go ahead. I was born from her dream, so I am willing to return to being one of her dreams as long as she gets to live." "I am also prepared," Albion stated. "As long as you promise me that you will save her, you can take my life." It was only then that the two monsters noticed the presence of other people, including the Laplace demon. They didn't really know who he was, but their gut instinct was telling them that he was someone that they mustn't offend no matter what. Both of them also noticed that the world around them had turned gray in color and that all the monsters in the distance, including those who were flying in the sky, weren't moving. "Listen, this is what we are going to do," 13 said as he explained to the two monsters what they needed to do. Uncle Boo and Albion listened without saying a word until the boy had finished telling them everything. When 13 was done talking, both of them glanced at each other before nodding their heads at the same time. "Do it." Uncle Boo wiped the tears in his eyes before holding Callie's hand. Albion looked at 13 with a determined glance before bowing his head. "Thank you." He was proud and arrogant and had never bowed his head to anyone. But this time, he did just that because this was the only way he could show how grateful he was. "Laplace demon, everyone is ready," 13 said. "Let's start." Laplace demon nodded before walking behind Gerald and Alessia. He then raised his palms as he did what 13 had asked of him. Alessia and Gerald both glowed faintly, and a golden orb of light floated out of their bodies. These two golden lights then merged into one, glowing faintly like a flickering candle in the darkness. "It's time," 13 said. "Sha, do it." Sha nodded and took out her sword. Uncle Boo stood up and nodded his head at the teenage girl, who was about to take his life. Lowering his resistance to the fullest, Uncle Boo closed his eyes and only hoped that Shasha would make it quick. Shasha coated her blade with the power of the moonlight and pierced Uncle Boo's chest in one swift and deadly blow. A purple mist escaped Uncle Boo's body and flew toward the flickering golden flame. The flame then greedily absorbed the life force of the beholder, making its flame grow brighter with each passing second. Elyon then gently laid Callie on the ground before standing still. He didn't say any word, for there was no need to say anything. Just like what Shasha did to Uncle Boo, Shasha also pierced the unicorn's chest with her sword. Elyon's life force also flew toward the golden flame, burning brightly. Laplace Demon waited until Uncle Boo's and Elyon's life force had been fully absorbed by the golden flame before he made his move. He touched Callie's head, and a few seconds later, a blue orb of light emerged from her forehead and slowly floated toward the golden flame, merging with it. When that was done, Laplace Demon pointed his fingers at 13th's and Callie's chests, piercing a hole into them. The 10-year-old's blood flowed toward the golden flame, while Callie's blood flowed toward 13th's body. This process lasted for half a minute before both of their blood stopped flowing. The younger boy swayed at where he stood, but Shasha was quick enough to catch him. With his sister supporting her, 13 regained his balance. He looked at the golden flame, whose brightness was slowly receding. Suddenly, from within that golden light, the cry of a baby was heard. When the light fully disappeared, a newborn baby girl floated towards Alessia, and the latter held her gently in her embrace. "It's done," Laplace Demon declared before looking at the crying baby girl, who had been born through unnatural means. He didn't know what kind of fate awaited her in the future, but one thing was certain. She was no longer the Moon Princess, and she would no longer be forced to dance in the palms of the King of Artem, who was still fuming because he didn't get the chance to descend in Solterra and crush the boy who had gotten in his way. "Mother, father, please return to Pangea for now," 13 said weakly. Alessia and Gerald both nodded their heads and entered the dimensional gate directly linked to their home. As soon as 13's parents passed through it, Laplace Demon closed the gate and then pointed at Callie's corpse, summoning a fire that incinerated it until nothing was left. "We will talk later," Laplace Demon said to 13 via telepathy. "We need to discuss the clause of our contract." 13 nodded in understanding, knowing that what the demon said was right. He invoked the clause of the contract without any basis for it, which resulted in this current situation. Faster than an eye could blink, the demon disappeared in front of them, and time flowed back to normal. Uncle Boo's and Elyon's bodies reverted into their natural forms and laid lifeless on the ground. "Rocky, take them," 13 ordered. The magma Balboa then emerged from the ground and swallowed the corpses of the 2 rank 8 sovereigns. "What now, Zion?" Shasha asked as she supported her brother's body. "Now we just wrap things up," 13 replied. "You will pass through the gate of the moonlight and return to Pangea. You'll come with me, right?" Shasha asked. Her brother had already been in Solterra for 3 years, so she wanted him to return with her to Pangea at the same time. "I will be back in a few days," 13 replied. "There are still things that I need to finish here. I need to return Taiga to his home, as well as deal with the aftermath. Overall, that will take me about a few days to finalize. But once I'm done, I promise that I will be back without fail." Shasha nodded in understanding because her brother always kept his word. If he said that he would return in a few days, he would return in a few days and not in a few years. An hour later, "You really did it," Rayon, who had stayed behind despite 13's warning, said as he looked at the younger boy, who was seated on top of Giga. "Ha ha, of course he did," Kane said with a smug smile on his face. "That's my brother-in-law. I can't wait to brag about this adventure to my family." "Who are you calling brother-in-law?" 13 glared at the teenage boy. "Taiga, toss that idiot through the gate of the moonlight." "With pleasure." Taiga, who had long been itching to smack his love rival, didn't hesitate to follow 13's orders and grappled the annoying teenage boy. "You bastard, let me go." Kane, who was overpowered by the Tigerkin, could only shout and curse as Taiga lifted him up. "Go to hell." Taiga roared as he threw Cain towards the gate of the moonlight, which made Rayon, Rio, Herman, Phoebe, Miriam, and Lambert smirk. They had to admit this free dog show was quite amusing. Go, 13 said to Shasha. Make sure to tell everyone that I'll be back in a few days and that they shouldn't worry about me. Okay. Shasha nodded before hugging her brother and planting a kiss on his cheek. I'll see you soon. After bidding her farewell, Shasha ran toward the gate of the moonlight without looking back. Only when his sister had finally passed through the gate did 13 breathe a sigh of relief in his heart. See you later, Zion, Rio said. And thank you for everything. I'll tell my friends what happened here, Lambert stated. I'm sure they will feel envious because I met you during my first mission in Solterra. I'll tell Rihanna that I met you. Phoebe smiled sweetly. I'm sure she'll be happy to hear news about you. Herman pressed his closed fist on his chest and gave 13 a slight bow. If we ever see each other in the future, I'll make sure to return this favor. As will I, Rayon promised. You have my word. Very well, 13 replied. All of you owe me a favor. I won't be shy and will ask you to return it in the future. Now go. There's no telling when that gate will close. You don't want to get stranded here, right? After hearing 13's reminder, the teenagers no longer hesitated and passed through the gate. Truth be told, the gate of the moonlight wouldn't disappear until sunrise, so there was plenty of time left before it vanished completely, never to be seen again. The good thing about this gate was that 13 no longer needed to ferry everyone back to their respective territories using Rocky's mobile fortress, just like how he brought his reinforcements to the island. The only armies that he didn't bring with him were Kamisat's and Camerasipa's armies. The Magian Prince and Magian Princess had their own means of travel and brought their forces alongside them. And for that, 13 was very thankful. After all, it saved a lot of time. Zion, aren't you going home yet? Lady Callista asked as she approached her grandson. By the way, where's Alessia? I don't see her anywhere. Arthur was right beside her when she disappeared. Where did she go? Mother's already back in Pangea, Grandma, 13 replied. So, you and the rest should go back too. You can use this gate to return home. You should have told me that earlier, Arthur said in annoyance. Gramps, make sure to wait for me, okay? 13 said with a smile, ignoring the old man's glare. If you don't, you'll regret it for life. Arthur scoffed, but he didn't say anything else. Will this gate really take us back to Pangea? Michael asked as he adjusted the glasses on his face. Are you sure? I'm sure, 13 replied. The younger boy had asked Laplace Demon earlier if it was possible for everyone, aside from the Wanderers, to use the Gate of the Moonlight. The demon confirmed that they could indeed use it without a problem. So, aside from Taiga and his subordinates, who had followed 13 on his adventures, everyone else would return to their homeland. Just as Arthur was about to ask another question, Kamisats descended beside the younger boy, making Arthur, Lady Callista, Michael, and Hans all take a fighting stance. Zion, where are the goods? Kamisats rubbed his palms excitedly. You said that you would give it to me after the cleanup was finished. Now give them to me. You're too impatient, 13 frowned. It's not like I'll just run away, you know? I wouldn't put it past you to do that. Kamisats smirked as he eyed the Wanderers, who were looking at him with a wary gaze. I mean, I might be a happy-go-lucky guy, but if you do me dirty, I can still turn these Wanderers into breakfast, you know? 13 arched an eyebrow as he looked at the death bat, who had a devilish smile plastered on his face. Later, 13 said firmly, You and Camerasipa already have the highest gains in this mission, and you still think that I will run away? Are you kidding me? Who do you think convinced her to lend you that artifact, so that you could get some new subordinates? The 10-year-old looked at the death bat in contempt, which made the latter chuckle and lightly pat 13's shoulder. I'm just joking, Kamisats replied. Aren't we best friends for life? You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It's that simple, right? 13 ignored the death bat's chummy attitude and glanced at the members of the Levinas family. Keep everything that you saw and heard here on the island a secret, 13 stated in a serious tone. If you don't, things will become complicated in Pangea. Lady Callista, Arthur, Michael, and Hans nodded in understanding. Rocky, let's go, 13 ordered. Rocky then swallowed up 13 and Giga before submerging itself to the ground like a fish in water. Kamisats smirked before flying toward the place where Camarasipa was waiting for him. Arthur. Lady Callista glanced at her husband worriedly. "Let's not talk about it here," Arthur replied. "We should return to Pangea first." Arthur held Lady Callista's hand and walked toward the gate with her. Hans followed after them, while Michael stayed behind. The retainers of the Levinus family were still not finished collecting their spoils of war. Frankly, they gained a lot from this expedition in more ways than one. "My nephew sure is capable," Michael thought as he adjusted his glasses. "But why do I have a feeling that the future doesn't look too bright?" The second-in-command of the Levintus family couldn't shake the feeling that 13 would start causing trouble after he returned to Pangea. Michael hoped that he was just overthinking things. He soon brushed the thought off and went back to supervising his people and forming connections with the Order of Raziel, who was very influential in the human kingdoms of Solterra.